Chapter 1303. When Xiaohua's gaze fell on the other talisman papers he bought from the refining talisman school, his eyes unconsciously lit up. These are talisman papers specially refined by the refining talisman school. Aren't they much stronger than the talisman papers refined by Senior Ma? If I use these talisman papers, I should be able to succeed. Xiaohua didn't hurry to start refining. He first closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. He circulated Shanghua Ming's Qi Refinement Stage 2 cultivation method in his meridians a few times, replenishing the magic power he used to refine dozens of yellow talismans in one go. Only then did he open his eyes. The magic power required to refine yellow talismans is considerable. I've only tried dozens of times, but I didn't succeed even once. I actually used up 80% of the magic power in my body. Without magic power cultivation, I really can't succeed. Xiaohua took a deep breath and took out the talisman brush again. He controlled a thread of magic power with extreme precision and slowly sent it into the talisman brush. Then, just like before, he touched the talisman ink and sent his magic power into it. With a shake of his wrist, he drew the talismans that he couldn't be more familiar with on the unfolded talisman paper stroke by stroke. Hiss! A light sound was heard. This time, he drew more talismans than the previous dozens of times. However, after reaching a certain point, the incomplete yellow talisman still emitted green smoke without mercy. Following the green smoke, the entire talisman paper turned into a ball of flame. It shone brightly for a moment, then turned into a pile of ashes. Sigh, Xiaohua was speechless. He put down the talisman brush in his hand. He stood up with his hands behind his back and quietly stared at the slightly flickering wall. It wasn't that he didn't want to continue trying, but the previous dozens of times already told him that as long as he failed in this place, even if he tried a few more times, it wouldn't be much better than this. Why is that? Didn't the talisman master of the refining talisman school also say that? I can use these talisman papers, talisman ink, and talisman brushes to practice refining fireball talismans. These talisman crafting materials are also specialized in making fire-type yellow talismans. If I can't succeed, there's no reason for them to give it to me. Moreover, this fireball talisman is a low-level yellow talisman. Even if it's a special talisman paper, compared to the talisman paper Senior Ma gave me, it's still. I can't buy high-grade talisman paper, talisman ink, and talisman brushes for this fireball talisman. Xiaohua thought to himself, if it's like this, even if I can craft fireball talismans, then how would heaven-forsaken view it? Although they didn't mention anything about talisman crafting materials, using a high-grade material to craft a low-grade fireball talisman, I don't feel embarrassed. It's so difficult. Xiaohua let out a long sigh. He sat down cross-legged, put everything into his storage bag, and closed his eyes to cultivate. At this time, it was already night. The starlight followed the fluctuations of tracing light in Xiaohua's mind and projected onto his body, slowly seeping into his meridians and body. Furthermore, there was an extremely large amount of starlight surrounding Xiaohua's Naiwen Palace, slowly seeping into it with great difficulty. Suddenly, that cocoon-like starlight suddenly disappeared. Xiaohua opened his eyes, and his eyes were filled with pleasant surprise. He flew away while shouting, How could I be so foolish? Since I can easily craft a message talisman using a technique, and I can also easily imitate the sect master's technique for refining pills, why did I insist on using that talisman brush? That toy. Although it can replace fingers and pass magic power through the talisman brush, it's very easy to control. But for me, I seem to be born with a very good control over magic power. When I form a technique, why do I have to be like other people and pass magic power through the talisman brush? Ha! Xiaohua laughed heartily. He formed a technique and melted a piece of talisman ink once again. After pondering for a while, he tapped his finger on the talisman ink. Then, he placed his hand on the talisman paper. His 10 fingers urged magic power, and he drew the talisman ink on the talisman paper according to the fireball talisman's inscription. In a short moment, a fireball talisman was drawn by Xiaohua. Yes, it was drawn. And definitely not refined. The fireball talisman was stuck on the talisman paper. The thickness was uneven. Although the lines were all extremely correct, but the talisman paper was still talisman paper, and the talisman ink was still talisman ink. What is this? Xiaohua looked at the thing he made by slapping his head, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this moment a poof sound rang out. All of the talisman ink wrapped in magic power dissipated without a trace. Only a blank talisman paper was left, completely undamaged. Was I wrong? Xiaohua frowned. He seemed to have thought of something, but when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't grasp the clue. In the end, where did I go wrong? Xiaohua stood up and paced back and forth in the room. After an unknown amount of time, Xiaohua suddenly stopped and said to himself, I drew the fireball talisman, but when I used my finger to draw on the talisman paper, the thickness is uneven. I can't form a real talisman. The reason for the uneven thickness is that the time my finger touches the talisman paper is different. Although my magic power can be finely controlled, touching the talisman paper requires many times of practice to become proficient. That's right. Thinking up to here, Xiaohua clapped his hands and said with a smile, I was wrong again. Since I can't draw the talisman on the talisman paper at the same time, why can't I draw the talisman on the outside of the talisman paper, and then directly inscribe it on the talisman paper? But, in the small book that Senior Qin gave me, there was no such spell. Suddenly, Xiaohua's hand involuntarily waved. A series of spells that seemed unfamiliar to Xiaohua, but he felt extremely familiar with, came out of his hand. Moreover, compared to the fireball talisman spell, this spell was even more profound and obscure. It was to the point that it was a completely different type of spell. This is the spell to inscribe the talisman onto the talisman paper? Xiaohua had some understanding in his heart. Suppressing the unparalleled excitement in his heart, Xiaohua took a deep breath, dipped his finger in talisman ink, and drew the fireball talisman. After the practice just now, and trying out even more profound talismans, this fireball talisman appeared extremely simple. In just a moment, Xiaohua used talisman ink to draw a complete fireball talisman out of thin air. Soon after, Xiaohua's fingers moved in succession. It was the spell that he had just thought of. After the spell was completed, Xiaohua pushed his hand and reprimanded. Quick! Ka! A crisp sound rang out. The fireball talisman in the air landed on the talisman paper, making a sound. A yellow fireball talisman was born. This really succeeded. Ha ha ha, this is truly inconceivable. Xiaohua saw that the fireball talisman was actually successfully refined. He didn't dare to believe his eyes. When he picked up the fireball talisman, he was even more stunned. His eyes were practically about to pop out of their sockets. High-grade fireball talisman? This. Xiaohua couldn't help but rub his eyes, carefully looking at the fireball talisman in his hand. There's no mistake, it's really a fireball talisman. Compared to the high-grade fireball talisman Senior Bai showed me, the talismans are even more detailed. The fire-type spiritual energy contained inside the talisman is even more powerful. If this fireball talisman isn't a high-grade one, the yellow talisman shop of the Fujian sect will be smashed by others. Countless thoughts flashed through Xiaohua's mind. Even if I can refine a fireball talisman, but I can't directly refine a high-grade fireball talisman. At best, a low-grade fireball talisman would be pretty good. Don't tell me that I relied on my own hand technique just now? Right, since I can discard this talisman brush, then, this talisman ink, and talisman paper, can I also discard it? Although I don't know if it's possible, I feel that it's indeed possible. Xiaohua frowned again. He sat down on the ground, not paying attention to the fireball talisman floating in the air. He closed his eyes and started to ponder. But if I don't use the talisman ink, what can I use to imprison the magical power on the talisman paper? If I don't have the talisman paper, what can I use to carry the magical power and produce the talisman? There must be. It's just that I don't know. Or rather, I can't remember. With his eyes closed, Xiaohua looked at the reverse light and the space behind his head. I don't know when I'll be able to retrieve my memories from this reverse light. At that time, I'll probably know about my life and this talisman crafting technique. After a long while, Xiaohua's joy of successfully refining the fireball talisman was diluted by his emotions of not being able to find his memories. Xiaohua simply turned his 5 hearts to the sky and silently operated Shang Huaming's cultivation technique. He adjusted his emotions to the state of being unintentional. Only then did his face sink. His eyes were calm. He waved his hands, dipped them in talisman ink, and drew 2 identical fireball talismans in the air. Then, his hands formed hand seals and waved at the same time. Ka-ka! 2 crisp sounds rang out. 2 high-grade fireball talismans were produced at the same time. Only when the 2 high-grade yellow talismans were produced at the same time did Xiaohua retract his hands. He placed his hands in front of his eyes and turned them back and forth several times. Then, his 10 fingers moved slightly, appearing extremely nimble. This kind of dexterous hand seal was absolutely innate. It was also what Xiaohua possessed before he lost his memories. It had nothing to do with Shang Huaming and Yellow Flower Ridge. In any case, I refined it myself. Why should I care about what's going on? At this moment, Xiaohua was extremely calm. He believed that as time passed, there would definitely be even more astonishing things happening to him. Everything that happened now was merely a prelude. Although Xiaohua was in the early stage of the second layer of the qi refining realm, the magic power in his body was extremely vigorous. It was absolutely not something that cultivators of the same level could compare to. Just now, he had refined 3 high-grade fireball talismans. He practically didn't consume much magic power, far less than using talisman brushes. Next, Xiaohua also wanted to refine the talisman ink and talisman paper he bought from the refining talisman school's shop into fireball talismans in one go. However, he spent a mid-grade spirit stone in the shop and a low-grade talisman brush cost 50 low-grade spirit stones. That middle-aged cultivator also gave Xiaohua 30 pieces of low-grade talisman ink and 2,000 blank low-grade talisman papers. According to that middle-aged cultivator's estimation, these 2,000 low-grade talisman papers would be enough for Xiaohua to practice his craft. Unfortunately, he never imagined that Xiaohua's talisman crafting technique would be so inconceivable. Apart from wasting all the blank talisman papers Ma Qiqing gave him, there were also several pieces of talisman paper he bought in the beginning that were wasted. Afterwards, there were practically no wasted talisman papers. Therefore, after Xiaohua used up all 30 pieces of talisman ink and refined more than 300 high-grade fireball talismans, there were still more than 1,000 blank low-grade talisman papers left. -5. Chapter 1304. What made Xiaohua the happiest wasn't that he refined over 300 high-grade fireball talismans, but rather, the growth of his magic power. Speaking of which, the magic power within Xiaohua's body was far stronger than those of the same stage, but his realm was only at the second level of qi refinement, so of course it wasn't enough to support the refinement of over 300 fireball talismans. After Xiaohua refined several dozen fireball talismans, the magic power within his body was completely exhausted, and he couldn't continue. He could only stop and use Shang Huaming's qi refinement technique to regulate his breathing and restore his magic power. At the beginning, he didn't think much of it, but in the end, after he used up all the talisman ink, he checked the magic power within his body. This mere night of refining talismans actually increased his magic power by more than 3 days of pure cultivation. Ha ha ha! Xiaohua unconsciously raised his head and laughed heartily. The heavenly law is the most fair. Although the growth of my magic power is slow and the growth of my realm is even more difficult, even refining a fireball talisman that can earn spirit stones can increase my magic power. What can I complain about? For a moment, Xiaohua's mood was free from worry. He felt that there were no more difficult things in this world. Even if there was a mountain of danger, there would certainly be a path to the mountain. I refined yellow talismans for an entire night. I'm afraid it's already morning. I don't know if Fan Rigwan has returned or not. His mother is fine. Xiaohua suddenly thought of Fan Rigwan, and felt very uneasy for rashly giving him a parasol pill. Removing the restriction in the room, Xiaohua walked out of the room and into the hall. He met the waiter who came to greet him. It was the same waiter from yesterday. Greetings, Senior Immortal. Are you going out? It's already afternoon. If you still want to stay here tonight, I'm afraid you'll have to pay the spirit stones for the night first. The waiter's tone was the same, but it was less enthusiastic. Afternoon? Xiaohua was slightly stunned and looked at the sky. Of course, the sun hanging high in the sky was already leaning south. Has Fan Rigwan returned? Xiaohua immediately asked. Senior Immortal, please know that Brother Fan hasn't returned yet. Didn't you say yesterday that he would return at noon today? Xiaohua thought to himself. This? I don't know. The waiter replied respectfully. Oh, I see. Xiaohua wanted to ask where Fan Rigwan's home was, but after thinking about it, if Fan Rigwan's mother had taken the parasol pill and lost her life, then it would have happened last night. Even if he found his home now, what use would it be? Xiaohua was filled with regret. He patted his storage pouch and handed the remaining 9 low-grade spirit stones to the waiter. He said, After I leave, I'll hand over these low-grade spirit stones to the counter when I come back. However, when the waiter saw this, his face revealed a troubled expression. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, Immortal Elder, please don't make things difficult for me. If you want to give me 10 spirit stones, just give me 10 spirit stones. 9 spirit stones. The counter doesn't allow you to take them. Furthermore, it's still early in the evening. Before the sky turns dark, the array in the room won't change. Senior Immortal, you only need to return before your immortal talisman loses its effect and hand over the 10 spirit stones. Actually, if there's nothing in your house, it doesn't matter even if the array in your house fails. You just need to come back at night and ask the shopkeeper to give you a new talisman. Oh, Xiaohua understood. He nodded and said, I understand. As he said this, he put the spirit stones into his storage pouch and walked out without looking back. Yesterday, he didn't have any spirit stones in his pouch, so he had no choice but to look around. Today, he already had 20 mid-grade spirit stones in his pouch. Wouldn't he be able to stay wherever he went? Why should he be restricted to this place? Moreover, he had already noticed a slight change in the waiter's attitude. He felt shameless in his heart, so he didn't feel like saying half a word more. After leaving the inn, Xiaohua pondered for a while. He wasn't sure which yellow talisman shop he should go to. After thinking for a while, he came up with an excuse in his mind. Only then did he walk straight to the refining talisman school's middle-aged cultivator's yellow talisman shop. Normally, it should be afternoon right now, so there should be customers. However, when Xiaohua entered, the shop was empty. There was only a second-layer aura refining boy holding a thin booklet in his hand, reading it with rapt attention. When the boy heard the sound of footsteps, he immediately raised his head and put away the booklet. He said with a smile, Fellow Taoist. When he saw Xiaohua's face and knew he came yesterday, he became even more enthusiastic. So it's fellow Taoist. You just came to my small shop yesterday. What do you need today? Xiaohua looked left and right and asked curiously. Yesterday, I saw a lot of customers in your shop. Now, why is there no one here? This? The boy stared at Xiaohua, not knowing what he meant. A moment later, he rolled his eyes and said with a smile, Maybe it's because the weather is hot and people are sleepy. They're all taking an afternoon nap. Afternoon nap? Xiaohua pinched his nose. He knew this boy was being perfunctory, so he nodded and said, Fellow Taoist is right. The boy was a bit impatient. He cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist, I bought a lot of talisman-making materials yesterday. I'm afraid they won't be used for a long time. Did you come today to buy yellow talismans? Upon seeing this, Xiaohua said with a smile, In my school, there are masters with profound cultivation who can refine yellow talismans. I don't need to always come to buy them. Then why did fellow Taoists come? Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said, I don't know if your shop has a talisman refining technique. I want to buy it and study it. Talisman refining technique? The boy was stunned. Soon after, disdain appeared on his face as he replied, Fellow Taoists, since your school has masters with profound cultivation who can refine yellow talismans, you naturally have a talisman refining technique. Why are you coveting my talisman refining schools? Could it be that fellow Taoist is making fun of I? The boy was much younger than Xiaohua and his cultivation was deeper than Xiaohua's. He had long looked down on Xiaohua in his heart. Now that he heard Xiaohua's thoughts, he became even angrier and his tone became a bit more angry. Heh, I just want to compare them for reference. Xiaohua didn't get angry and said with a smile, Does your shop have them or not? How is that possible? The boy was somewhat flustered and exasperated. The talisman refining technique is my talisman refining school's most precious inheritance. How could it be placed in the shop for sale? Did you get stimulated at the E-Bazaar in the south of the city and came to my shop to make fun of me? E-Bazaar? Xiaohua was stunned and said inwardly, What is this place? Before Xiaohua could open his mouth, he heard someone berate behind the boy. Qing Miao, is this how you speak to a customer? When Xiaohua raised his head to look, it was precisely that middle-aged cultivator. His expression was also somewhat displeased as he walked out from inside. Senior Marshal brother. The boy turned his face and said with extreme grievance, This guy. I'm afraid he came to cause trouble. Fellow Taoist. That middle-aged cultivator should have also heard the conversation between the two. He walked closer and cupped his hands. Within my talisman refining school's shop, we only sell yellow talismans and talisman refining materials. We don't sell talisman refining techniques. Within all the shops within Jingpa City, there's also no talisman refining techniques for sale. If fellow Taoist wants to look, you should go to the E-Bazaar in the south of the city and try your luck. Perhaps you can even exchange for talisman refining techniques. Talisman? Xiaohua's heart stirred, then he said with a smile on his face, Senior, please calm down. I was only joking with fellow Taoist. Don't take it seriously. That middle-aged cultivator's gaze flickered. His expression didn't change, and his tone was still indifferent as he asked, Then, fellow Taoist, why have you come to my humble shop again? Xiaohua smiled and said, It's nothing much. I have 2 matters to discuss with Senior. What 2 matters? The middle-aged cultivator was somewhat baffled. Xiaohua patted his storage pouch and took out the talisman brush from within. He handed it over and said with a smile, This talisman brush. Junior used it last night, but forget it. Junior isn't afraid of making a fool of himself in front of Senior. Yesterday, I bought some talisman papers and other materials to refine fireball talismans from your esteemed shop. Last night, I was idle and had nothing to do, so I asked the elders of my school to give me pointers on the refining method. But I refined it for a long time and still couldn't refine one. Xiaohua hadn't finished speaking when the boy at the side burst out laughing. He covered his mouth and was practically about to bend over. Qing Miao. The middle-aged cultivator wasn't surprised at all. He only coldly berated. What face do you have to laugh at me? You don't even have the guts to refine it. Soon after, he cupped his hands towards the embarrassed Xiaohua and said, Fellow Taoist, please don't blame me. Actually, fellow Taoist, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Even though the fireball talisman is a low-level yellow talisman, it's still a true offensive yellow talisman. It can't be compared to a supplementary yellow talisman like a messaging talisman. Fellow Taoist cultivation is still shallow. Being able to have the guts to refine it, and not be afraid of failure is already commendable. Cough cough, my school's elders also said this, so... Xiaohua awkwardly looked at the talisman brush in his hand and said, This talisman brush. Junior hasn't used it much. Do you think? Can I return it to Senior? That middle-aged cultivator didn't expect that Xiaohua actually came to return the talisman brush. He unconsciously hesitated. Actually, even though this talisman brush is a low-level one, it's still refined by my talisman refining school. There's no harm in fellow Taoists keeping it first. It won't be too late to use it after a few years when your cultivation has increased. Senior, Xiaohua pleaded. This talisman brush. I'm afraid Junior won't be able to use it for over 10 years. There's no need to talk about talisman paper and talisman ink, they aren't worth much spirit stones. My other senior martial brothers can also use them, but this talisman brush. Senior martial brothers all have it. Wait until Junior's cultivation has deepened in the future, then I'll come back to your store to buy a high-grade talisman brush. What do you think? You're so unreasonable. The boy at the side jumped up. If your cultivation isn't enough, then don't try to show off. Since you bought it and can't use it, you still want to return it. How can disciples of large sects like you all be so overbearing? Qing Miao. The middle-aged cultivator couldn't help but berate. Shut up. Then he smiled apologetically at Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist. If this talisman brush is useless, then you can return it. But since you've already used it, forgive my store for being unable to do anything. Oh? Since it's like this. Xiaohua shook his head and said, since it's like this, then. Junior also has nothing to say. Sigh, I originally wanted to talk about a good matter with your store. Let's stop here. That middle-aged man's eyes slightly moved, and he asked, I wonder if fellow Taoists, the second matter you mentioned just now is. Xiaohua slightly spun the talisman brush in his hand, and said with a smile, the first matter still hasn't come to an end, so of course there isn't a second matter. Looking at Xiaohua's almost rascal appearance, the middle-aged cultivator wore a smile at the corners of his mouth. He took the talisman brush, carefully looked at it, and nodded, saying, fellow Taoist is right. This talisman brush has only been used 20 or so times. It can also be considered new. This new bite is very heavy. Xiaohua's face was embarrassed, yet he revealed a trace of a smile. Since fellow Taoist wants to return it like this, then I will also help fellow Taoist. The middle-aged cultivator said somewhat helplessly. However, a new talisman brush costs 50 low-grade spirit stones. If my humble store wants to return it, I can only return 30 to fellow Taoist. Huh? Why so little? Xiaohua's face revealed displeasure, and he pointed at the talisman brush and said, didn't Senior also say it? This talisman brush has only been used 20 times, and it's still very new. Fellow Taoist, not to mention that this talisman brush has only been used 20 times, even if it's only been used once, fellow Taoist's magic power has already contaminated this talisman brush. Say, if it's fellow Taoist, would you still buy this talisman brush? The middle-aged cultivator said with a chuckle. This? Xiaohua's face was somewhat hesitant, and he thought for a moment, then said, how about this, Senior, spare me another 10 high-grade talisman papers. You, fellow Taoist, don't push your luck. If fellow Taoist doesn't agree, then please take back this talisman brush. The middle-aged cultivator's face slightly changed. Cough, cough, forget it. Since Senior has spoken like this, then I'll do as Senior says. When Xiaohua saw this, he hurriedly waved his hand, and he immediately placed his hand behind his back, looking like he wouldn't accept the talisman brush even if the middle-aged cultivator gave it to him. Humph. The middle-aged cultivator snorted from his nose, and he threw the talisman brush towards the boy, then said, Qing Miao, this talisman brush can be considered a gift from Senior Brother to you. When you refine talismans in the future, you must remember Senior Brother's kindness. Yes, Senior Brother. The boy happily received it, but the middle-aged cultivator's next sentence caused him to immediately cry. These 30 low-grade spirit stones will be deducted from your salary. Soon after, the middle-aged cultivator cupped his hands and said, I wonder what fellow Taoist's second good thing is? He, Xiaohua said with a smile. Senior said yesterday that if Junior has high-grade yellow talismans, your shop can purchase them for 1 medium-grade spirit stone. The middle-aged cultivator's brows slightly wrinkled, and he corrected. It's 40 to 80 low-grade spirit stones, not 1 medium-grade spirit stone. Soon after, he said disapprovingly, could it be that fellow Taoist has high-grade yellow talismans? That's right, Xiaohua said proudly. Yesterday, the elders of my sect guided Junior's cultivation, and I refined some high-grade fireball talismans. I wonder if Senior is interested in purchasing them? Hearing Xiaohua's words, the middle-aged cultivator who originally thought that there was something good immediately deflated. Of course, a high-grade fireball talisman is worth 50 to 100 low-grade spirit stones in his shop, and if he buys them from Xiaohua, it's only 40 to 80 low-grade spirit stones. He can only earn a difference of 10 to 20 low-grade spirit stones at most. Can this be considered a good thing? The middle-aged cultivator originally wanted to refuse, but thinking about how he just received the talisman brush returned by Xiaohua, and how Xiaohua said yesterday that the shop can purchase them, he could only weakly say, Fellow Taoists, please take out the fireball talismans refined by your sect's elders for me to take a look. I have already said if they aren't high-grade fireball talismans. Oh, if the number is too small, I am also not interested. -5. Chapter 1305. Hearing the middle-aged cultivator agree, Xiaohua was overjoyed in his heart. He didn't care about the embarrassment and displeasure on the middle-aged cultivator's face. He slapped his hand and took out a fireball talisman he refined from his storage pouch. He handed it over and said with a smile, Senior, please appraise this. Is this a high-grade fireball talisman? You bastard, you still want my senior brother to appraise it? So you don't know this is a high-grade fireball talisman? The boy at the side had already jumped up and said in exasperation. Presumably, he was still regretting his 30 low-grade spirit stones salary. I'll let fellow Taoist know. Fellow Taoist's cultivation is higher than I's, and you're also cultivating in the refining talisman school. I wonder, when did you see a high-grade yellow talisman? Xiaohua asked back without hesitation. You. The boy called Xing Miao was speechless. Xiaohua's words had hit his weak spot. Although he was a disciple of the refining talisman school, his cultivation was only at the second level of the Qi refinement school. In the school, he belonged to the type with low cultivation. Because he didn't have any future in the area of cultivation and talisman crafting, he was sent to Jinghua City to be a shop assistant. Although he usually had a salary of spirit stones, his cultivation was still far inferior to his other senior brothers. Therefore, not to mention that he saw a high-grade yellow talisman very late, even a middle-grade yellow talisman was only seen in this shop in Jinghua City. The middle-aged cultivator took the fireball talisman from Xiaohua and casually glanced at it. His ears heard the two people bickering, and he couldn't help but be enraged. Just as he was about to berate them, his face suddenly changed. His hand slightly trembled and he hurriedly said, Fellow Taoist. What's wrong? Senior, could it be that this isn't a high-grade fireball talisman? Xiaohua was somewhat disappointed. He only roughly glanced at the appearance of a high-grade yellow talisman in the talisman school's shop. He wasn't completely sure in his heart. No. It's not. The middle-aged cultivator steadied his mind and cupped his hands while holding the fireball talisman. I am the refining talisman school's Tian Haoguang. Fellow Taoist, what's your name? Seeing Tian Haoguang introduce himself, Xiaohua's heart blossomed with joy. He smiled and cupped his hands. Senior Tian is Junior Xiao. Oh, fellow Taoist Xiao. Tian Haoguang was very polite at this time and said, I didn't expect. Alas, I was really rude. Based on what Senior Tian said, I didn't reveal any of my identity. Has Senior been rude? Xiaohua's eyes turned as he said with a light smile. Oh, if fellow Taoist is not worried, can you come inside and have a talk with I? What does Senior Tian have to say that you can't say here? Xiao Hua immediately said vigilantly. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't think too much, Tian Haoguang said with a smile. Fellow Taoist, this fireball talisman is a little strange. I have no choice but to test the power of this fireball talisman in the secret chamber. Therefore, I would like to ask fellow Taoists to enlighten me at the side. So it's like that. Xiao Hua was still somewhat hesitant. Senior brothers are still waiting for I in the inn. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't be anxious. It will only take a moment. It won't take up much of your senior brother's time. Then, all right. Xiao Hua nodded. Qing Miao, you make the decisions in the shop. Before I come out, don't disturb me, Tian Haoguang instructed, then said to Xiao Hua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please come with me. Senior, please go first. Tian Haoguang was also not polite. He took the lead and led Xiao Hua to the back. The back of the store was also extremely small. In addition, the front of the store was also slightly smaller than the store of the Fujian faction. As Tian Haoguang walked into a small room that was faintly illuminated, Xiao Hua subconsciously looked around. This room was only 1 square foot in size. Unlike the store in front of him, the walls of this room, from top to bottom, were covered with complicated runes, giving it a very mysterious appearance. However, Xiao Hua's current identity was a disciple of a big cultivation sect. Therefore, he tried not to reveal anything and only calmly looked at Tian Haoguang. After Tian Haoguang entered the room, he patted his storage pouch and took out a yellow talisman. He sent a trace of magic power into it. The yellow talisman emitted an extremely resplendent green brilliance. Soon after, Tian Haoguang stuck the yellow talisman on the wall. The green brilliance immediately spread around the yellow talisman. In the blink of an eye, the entire room was enveloped by the green brilliance. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this is the place where my sect tests the yellow talisman. It's really simple and crude. Please excuse us, Tian Haoguang said. Hee, it's just SOSO. Senior Tian, please begin, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Suddenly, he said again. That's right, Senior, the fireball talisman used for testing. Who is it? Oh? Tian Haoguang stared blankly, then immediately laughed and said, That's easy. If it's really a high-grade fireball talisman, then it's naturally my sect that will pay the spirit stones. If it's not a high-grade fireball talisman. Fellow Taoist Xiao, what do you say? I know. Naturally, there's no need for Senior Tian to pay the spirit stones, Xiao Hua replied. Actually, fellow Taoist Xiao, I wonder what the cultivation level of the senior who refined this fireball talisman is? Tian Haoguang hesitated for a moment and asked. Forgive me for not being able to tell you. Xiao Hua slightly shook his head. Then, sigh, I better not ask. I presume fellow Taoist Xiao will still say the same thing. Tian Haoguang smiled bitterly. Yes, indeed. I will still say the same. Forgive me for not being able to tell you, Xiao Hua said without the slightest hesitation, with a spring breeze on his face. Tian Haoguang once again carefully looked at the fireball talisman in his hand. He glanced at Xiao Hua and said in a low voice, Actually, I have a doubt in my heart. I didn't dare to rashly ask you in the shop just now. Please speak, Xiao Hua replied. I don't know what the cultivation level of your honorable sect senior is. I also don't know what kind of magic art this senior used. I'm really very curious in my heart. What? Is there a problem with this fireball talisman? Xiao Hua asked curiously. There isn't a problem. This is indeed a genuine fireball talisman. That's right. I really don't understand. How can this low-grade talisman paper be refined into a high-grade fireball talisman? Logically speaking, the quality of a low-grade talisman paper shouldn't be able to bear the magic power and spiritual energy contained within a high-grade fireball talisman. Tian Haoguang's eyes were filled with puzzlement. The only explanation I can think of is that your honorable sect senior used your honorable sect's special talisman refining technique. Of course, this isn't what I can't understand the most. What I can't figure out the most is that the runes on this fireball talisman, every stroke and stroke is abnormally uniform. It's as if there's no order at all, and they're all drawn at the same time with the talisman brush. Not to mention even if it's I's martial uncle, my refining talisman sect master, it's impossible for the runes he drew to be so consistent from start to finish. Nonsense, that's what I directly inserted into the talisman paper at the same time. Of course it's very uniform. Xiaohua snickered in his heart. Sure enough, Tian Haoguang said again. According to what I've seen and heard, this kind of technique seems to be drawing the talisman out of thin air, and then inserting it at the same time. Huh! Xiaohua was slightly startled and secretly said, "This Tian Haoguang really has some knowledge. He's almost right." But Tian Haoguang frowned again. But this kind of technique to insert the talisman out of thin air is the refining technique of jade talismans. In Xiaoyu continent, it's already lost. I've never heard of any sect in our country of Shi that still has this kind of consummate skill. Jade talisman? Xiaohua's eyes lit up and said with a smile. Could it be? Senior thinks that my sect's master knows the refining technique of jade talismans? Even though he wanted to know what a jade talisman was, but he didn't dare to ask blindly. That's not it. This technique seems to be the refining technique of jade talismans, but I can also say with certainty that this is absolutely not the refining technique of jade talismans, Tian Haoguang said resolutely and decisively. Huh! Why is Senior so sure? Xiaohua didn't understand. Because the talisman used in this fireball talisman is my country of Shi's most common and simplest kind. This kind of talisman needs to contain the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in order to emit fire energy. And jade talismans can't possibly contain spiritual energy. Tian Haoguang's brows wrinkled into a knot and said, "This is also what I don't understand the most. Since the sect's senior has such a profound refining technique, why would he use the most simple and crude talisman to create such a high-grade fireball talisman?" I thought you were going to say something? Xiaohua let out a long breath and said with hidden bitterness. Senior Tian, don't forget my sect's master is instructing this junior to refine talismans. If he used a profound talisman, would this junior be able to understand it? Look at me, I've walked into a dead end and actually forgot this part. Tian Haoguang slapped his forehead and laughed. I am really muddle-headed. However, fellow Taoist's master really has good technique. Using low-grade talisman paper and talisman ink, he was able to refine a high-grade fireball talisman. I presume that the talisman brush used by Senior was also specially made by Senior, right? No comment. Xiaohua still said the same sentence. All right, fellow Taoist Xiao, please be careful. I will begin testing the talismans. As Tian Haoguang spoke, he slapped his storage pouch again and took out another yellow talisman. With a flick of his hand, the yellow talisman turned into a flame and disappeared. An azure brilliance fell from the top of Xiaohua's heads, shielding the two of them behind it. Then, Tian Haoguang injected magic power into the fireball talisman. With the point of his finger, the yellow talisman slowly burned and lightly flew forward. Huh! Tian Haoguang's mouth softly let out an astonished sound. His finger slightly moved, and the small fireball burning in the yellow talisman was like a speck of brilliance. Following Tian Haoguang's finger, it swayed up and down, slowly flying towards the opposite wall. Boom! When the small fireball hit the wall, it made an extremely loud noise. The entire room was filled with a brilliant brilliance. Soon after, a gust of wind blew, followed by a blazing heat wave. The cyan light barrier in front of Xiaohua and Tian Haoguang shook violently, as if it was going to collapse at any moment. In the blink of an eye, the brilliance gradually dimmed, and the fierce wind and heat wave also gradually weakened. The azure light barrier finally couldn't hold on, and after a few swings, it disappeared without a trace. Xiaohua's mouth was wide open. He didn't expect that the fireball talisman he practiced would actually have such power. But Xiaohua wasn't the only one who was surprised. The one who was even more surprised was Tian Haoguang. Tian Haoguang could only be seen blankly staring at the opposite wall. On the wall, the azure brilliance had already burned an enormous hole. -5. Chapter 1306. On the wall, the fireball talisman burned an enormous hole in the azure brilliance. The surroundings of the hole were still faintly flickering with these wisps of flames, not immediately extinguishing. Tian Haoguang used his index finger to point in astonishment and muttered, Is this still a high-grade yellow talisman?" As he spoke, Tian Haoguang suddenly came to his senses. He quickly ran to the front of the blasted wall and carefully examined it from left to right. Xiaohua also followed him forward. The closer he got to the wall, the hotter it became. It was as if the air around the wall had been ignited. Tian Haoguang's face was incomparably astonished. He extended his hand and stroked the restriction that couldn't immediately return to its original state. After a long while, he sighed and turned his head around. He asked with great reverence, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, what kind of fire attribute cultivation method does your sex master cultivate?" Xiaohua shrugged his shoulders and still said the same sentence. "No comment. Sigh, this fireball talisman is clearly a high-grade yellow talisman. Yet I still insisted on testing its might. I presume that fellow Taoist Xiao certainly has some criticism towards I, right?" Tian Haoguang said with a smile. Xiaohua secretly said in his heart, "I've never thought of it that way." However, the corners of his mouth held a smile and he kept his mouth shut, declining to comment. "I'll tell you the truth." Tian Haoguang seemed to intend to lay his cards on the table. He pointed at the hole in the wall that still hadn't recovered and said, "Although the fireball talisman that fellow Taoist Xiao brought over is a high-grade yellow talisman no matter how you look at it, I personally saw you buy low-grade talisman ink and talisman paper in my humble shop yesterday. Therefore, I am very skeptical. Using a high-grade talisman brush, no, even if you used a legendary top-grade talisman brush, how could you possibly draw a high-grade yellow talisman? After all, the magic power and spiritual energy that this low-grade talisman paper and talisman ink can carry is limited. At most, it can only refine a middle-grade yellow talisman." Xiaohua slightly nodded, indicating for him to continue speaking. "That's why I had no choice but to come here and take the test. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please observe. But as I expected, the fireball talisman made by your sex master contained very little spiritual energy. It barely reached the limit of what the talisman paper and talisman ink could bear. But what was beyond I's expectation was that the magic power used to draw the talisman, although it was very little, it was the same as the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. But the magic power was of the fire attribute. Moreover, it was very mysterious. Only a little magic power was used to draw the talisman, and it could absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from the surroundings. If your sex master hadn't practiced the supreme fire attribute cultivation method, he wouldn't have been able to achieve such power." Hearing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel strange. Shan Huoming's cultivation method is water-based. This is what sect leader said himself. It's definitely true. Could it be that it's a problem with my attributes? Xiaohua very naturally thought of the matter of him holding the pearl in his hand to test his attributes in the Yellow Flower Ridge's inheritance palace. To be able to use chi condensation magic power to refine high-grade fireball talismans, no, looking at the power, it's even more powerful than ordinary high-grade fireball talismans. Your sex master, TSK, he's really brilliant! Tian Haoguang exclaimed in admiration. Xiaohua's eyes turned, and he slapped his forehead, looking as if he suddenly realized something. I was wondering why the 3 grandmasters only used chi condensation magic power. No wonder, it didn't take any effort to refine so many at once. 3 grandmasters? Tian Haoguang glanced at Xiaohua very strangely. He didn't know what he was thinking. Xiaohua immediately looked remorseful. He hurriedly changed the topic and said with a beaming smile, "Senior Tian, this high-grade yellow talisman has already been tested. It's genuine, right?" Indeed, then, what does Senior Tian plan to offer? How many spirit stones? Xiaohua's eyes started to shine. Yes, according to the usual market price, a high-grade fireball talisman is only 80 low-grade spirit stones. However, since fellow Taoist Xiao came here for the first time, and this fireball talisman is a bit better than ordinary high-grade yellow talismans, so I feel that one mid-grade spirit stone is fellow Taoist Xiao appropriate? Xiaohua's heart was already blooming with joy. How much did he spend? He originally thought that 30 or 40 low-grade spirit stones would be enough. He didn't expect that Tian Haoguang would actually offer one mid-grade spirit stone. This Tian Haoguang's reputation is really not ordinary. Xiaohua secretly nodded. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't speak, Tian Haoguang hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I's price is already very accommodating. I was still thinking that fellow Taoists could come to my humble shop more in the future. Ha ha ha, Senior Tian, it's not that I'm unwilling, it's just that I'm too happy. However, Senior has to keep it a secret. If the sex master finds out, my skin will be peeled off." Hee hee. Tian Haoguang's face was also full of smiles, with an I understand expression. It seems that he quite appreciates Xiaohua's straightforward manner. Since Senior Tian approves, Junior has 99 fireball talismans refined by my sex master. Senior Tian, please take a look. Let's see if they are the same high-grade fireball talismans. Xiaohua also laughed happily. He patted his storage bag and took out a large pile of identical fireball talismans. Hee hee, look at what fellow Taoist Xiao is saying. Since it's, what? 100? Tian Haoguang didn't pay attention to the number Xiaohua mentioned at first. After all, these fireball talismans were only refined last night when he was guiding Xiaohua in refining talismans. How could there be more? Although Tian Haoguang had a limit on the number just now, seeing these fireball talismans that were even more powerful than ordinary high-grade yellow talismans, how could he not want them? Not to mention the 3 grandmasters proficient in fire attribute cultivation methods that Xiaohua mentioned? When he realized that there were no less than 100 high-grade fireball talismans, he couldn't help but open his mouth in shock. Xiaohua saw that he had said too much and immediately laughed. Hee hee. My sex master was itching to test his skills. That a few of us exchanged pointers and unknowingly refined so many. My sex master wasn't very interested in these yellow talismans, so it was convenient for us, fellow apprentices. Oh, so that's how it is. In Tian Haoguang's mind, the appearance of the 3 young sex master fuming and glaring at each other emerged. They were unwilling to accept each other's loss and were immersed in painstakingly refining high-grade fireball talismans. He nodded his head in understanding. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you have good luck. Sigh, Senior Tian. I've made a fool of myself. How could it be my luck alone? Xiaohua squinted his eyes and laughed. Hee hee. Tian Haoguang took those high-grade fireball talismans and very carefully inspected them one by one. When he finished inspecting the 99 talismans, Xiaohua's face had long since revealed impatience. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you've been waiting impatiently. Tian Haoguang put all the yellow talismans into his storage pouch and laughed. These 100 high-grade fireball talismans are all genuine goods. I wonder if fellow Taoist Xiao is taking a high-grade spirit stone? Or 100 medium-grade spirit stones? Of course it's 100 medium-grade spirit stones, Xiaohua said without the slightest hesitation. A high-grade spirit stone, how do you want us to divide? Afterwards he shut his mouth with some regret. And since it's like this, fellow Taoist Xiao, please follow me. Tian Haoguang laughed as he led Xiaohua out of the secret room. Only after they stepped out of the room did Xiaohua's heart, which was hanging in the air, finally relax and let out a small breath. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait a moment, Tian Haoguang said and walked to the side. Xiaohua nodded his head and raised his eyes to look inside the shop. At this time, there were already several groups of cultivators around the 8th or 9th level of qi refinement picking out yellow talismans or talisman crafting materials in this small shop. The Qin Miao child who didn't see eye to eye with Xiao Hua was extremely busy. These are fellow Taoist spirit stones. Fellow Taoists, please count them and keep them well. Not long after, Tian Haoguang came back with a small storage pouch in his hand and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua didn't look carefully and nodded. How can this junior not be at ease with senior Tian handling things? As he spoke, he took the storage pouch and put the spirit stones into his own storage pouch without leaving a trace. He handed the empty storage pouch back to Tian Haoguang. After Tian Haoguang took it, he slapped it with his hand and took out 2 medium-grade spirit stones from the storage pouch at his waist and handed them to Xiao Hua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, these are the spirit stones returned by fellow Taoists for the talisman brush. Of course, there are also some of my humble store's appreciation. If you have any more good things like this in the future, don't forget my humble store. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed from smiling. He rubbed his hands and said, This is too embarrassing. I've troubled senior. As he spoke, his 2 hands had already received the 2 mid-grade spirit stones. With a wave of his hand, he placed them into his storage pouch. Tian Haoguang's expression didn't change. He slapped his hands again and took out a stack of talisman papers. He handed it over with a smile and said, These are 100 high-grade talisman papers. Fellow Taoist Xiao, if you have the chance, please give them to fellow Taoist's master. Just say, it's a small token of appreciation from my talisman refining school. Oh, fellow Taoist Xiao, don't misunderstand. These are 2 good things. I can't make the decision and I don't dare to give them too much. These are just for senior to play with when he has free time. I really don't respect you enough. So it's like this. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. He took it and said, But Senior Tian, I'm afraid there won't be many opportunities like last night. However, if there is any opportunity, this junior will definitely explain senior's intentions. I hope senior can understand this junior's difficulties. It's fine. Tian Haoguang waved his hand and said in a low voice, I won't hide it from fellow Taoist Xiao. I really want to know, if your school's master used high-grade talisman ink and high-grade talisman paper to refine a fireball talisman, what kind of power would it have? This still depends on the opportunity. Xiao Hua was a bit embarrassed. He looked at the high-grade talisman ink at the side and secretly said, You should also give a few pieces of high-grade talisman ink. Otherwise, how can I craft talismans for you? Unfortunately, high-grade talisman ink is worth a high-grade spirit stone. How could Tian Haoguang dare to make a decision on his own? Even if Xiao Hua looked at it 100 times, he would only act as if he didn't see it. Seeing that Tian Haoguang didn't have any reaction, Xiao Hua secretly felt that it was a pity. He cupped his hands and said, Senior Tian, this junior doesn't dare to stay for long. I'm sure senior brothers are already waiting anxiously. If there's an opportunity in the future, this junior will come to consult senior again. Tian Haoguang also returned the greeting. Well said, my humble store welcomes fellow Taoist Xiao at any time. Xiao Hua nodded, turned around, and steadily walked out of the yellow talisman store. With every step he took, he relaxed a bit. At the same time, he was also afraid of making another mistake. Fortunately, Tian Haoguang seemed to be really busy in the store. After sending Xiao Hua to the door, he immediately turned around to greet the customers and didn't give Xiao Hua an extra glance. -5. Chapter 1307. Xiao Hua didn't turn his head back. With a calm and composed appearance, he exited the yellow talisman shop and hurriedly left in a certain direction. It was as if there really were many fellow disciples waiting for him in front of him. After turning a corner on the street, Xiao Hua slightly turned his body. Seeing that there wasn't anyone behind him, he immediately turned around and headed in another direction. A moment later, he quickly flashed into a seemingly remote alley. Ha! Xiao Hua immediately jumped up, releasing the joy and worry that he had been suppressing for a long time. Don't be fooled by his calm appearance just now, his heart was really nervous. In the weapon refining school's shop, his hand almost never left his storage pouch. There was a flight talisman inside. Xiaohua was always worried that Tian Haoguang would do something unexpected. He was confident that he could use the flight talisman to escape the shop before Tian Haoguang had any strange thoughts. However, when he was testing the fireball talisman in the secret room, his life was really in Tian Haoguang's hands. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. Tian Haoguang was really like what Fan Riguan said. He was extremely principled and his reputation wasn't for nothing. He didn't covet Xiaohua's high-grade fireball talisman. Instead, he gave him a lot of things. Pinching the storage pouch at his waist, there were 120 mid-grade spirit stones inside. It was really a large sum of wealth. How could Xiaohua not be happy? However, when he looked up, he was dumbfounded again. Because he was in a hurry to leave, he got lost. Without any other choice, he could only find someone to ask for directions. Pitiful Xiaohua, he really didn't see the world. It was merely 100 mid-grade spirit stones. In his heart, it was an enormous wealth. However, in the eyes of the refining talisman school's Tian Haoguang, it really wasn't much. It was impossible for him to offend the non-existent, powerful school that Xiaohua spoke of just for such a small thing. Xiaohua was just not confident in his heart, and was afraid that others would see through his secret. A guilty conscience, presumably this was also the reason. However, the matter wasn't so simple. When Xiaohua walked out of the refining talisman school's shop, the cultivator who was selecting yellow talismans inadvertently raised his head and glanced at Xiaohua's back. He then inadvertently asked, "Who is this person? He doesn't look young. How come his cultivation is only at the second level of qi refining?" I don't know about that. All I know is that this guy has a high-grade yellow talisman on him, and wants to extort a used talisman brush from my refining talisman school. He wants my refining talisman school to return him 30 low-grade spirit stones. Qing Yao was definitely still angry about the small amount of spiritual stones. She said indignantly, "What's so great about having a powerful sect? You look older than me, but your cultivation is not as good as mine. Even in their sect, you're just an errand boy. What's there to be proud of? This brat has a sect? You have a high-grade yellow talisman?" The cultivator was clearly surprised. "What? Senior Zhang knows this, fellow Taoist?" Qing Miao was shocked and her expression changed slightly. Of course not. The fourth layer qi refining cultivator hurriedly waved his hand and bitterly smiled. "I'm just a rogue cultivator. How could I have the qualifications to know a second layer qi refining disciple who carries a high-grade yellow talisman with him? I only saw a loose cultivator in my cloud garden who had a similar back as this guy." "Oh, so it's like that." Qing Miao's expression returned to normal, and she said with a smile, "If it's a rogue cultivator, I might really have to teach this guy a lesson." "Qing Miao, what are you talking about?" Not far away, Tian Haoguang heard and scolded. "Fellow Taoist Zhang is also a rogue cultivator. Aren't you talking to fellow Taoist Zhang?" "Fellow Taoist Zhang, please don't take it to heart." Tian Haoguang smiled apologetically towards the cultivator. I wouldn't dare! The cultivator surnamed Zhang smiled and cupped his hands. "Zhang Jihao, quickly come and take a look." A cultivator beside Tian Haoguang seemed to have discovered something and called out. "Eh? Fellow Taoist son, what did you discover? You're actually directly calling I by my name like this?" Zhang Jihao was somewhat displeased. He tilted his head and looked at Xiaohua's almost invisible back. A pensive expression appeared in his eyes and he quickly walked towards that cultivator. Far away, Xiaohua, who was looking for people to scout the way, simply didn't know that he was deliberately mystifying himself and wanted to remove the matter of making high-grade yellow talismans from himself. Trying to cover it up only made it more conspicuous. He had provoked trouble for himself. Xiaohua found a middle-stage foundation establishment senior and respectfully asked for directions. Just as he arrived at a somewhat familiar street, he suddenly heard a pleasantly surprised voice behind him. That voice was so pleasantly surprised that even the tone of the voice had changed. It was shouting. Taoist Master Xiao! Xiao Hua stared blankly and looked left and right. There didn't seem to be anyone else in the surroundings, but he wasn't some Taoist master. Without any reason, Xiao Hua had no choice but to stop and turn his head to look. This look didn't matter, but Xiao Hua almost wanted to slap out a flight talisman from his storage pouch and fly away. Everyone, the person behind Xiao Hua needn't be said. It was none other than the waiter, Fan Riguan. At this moment, in Xiao Hua's heart, the victim's mother had come knocking. The voice was pleasantly surprised? Was there even a need to say it? He had finally found the well-intentioned culprit. Xiao Hua directly ignored the pleasant surprise on Fan Riguan's face. He clearly understood in his heart that the parasol pill couldn't cure his mother's chronic illness. Thus, he braced himself and stepped forward, cupping his hands and saying, "This, Brother Fan, I'm really sorry. My cultivation is shallow, and I didn't know the severity of the matter." Not waiting for Xiao Hua to finish speaking, Fan Riguan also didn't care what Xiao Hua said. He quickly stepped forward and kowtowed, saying, "Taoist Master Xiao, I kowtow and thank Taoist Master Xiao for your great kindness. I am only a mortal. I have no way of repaying Taoist Master Zhao's great kindness. I can only, thank you, ask Taoist Master Xiao for your understanding." "Ah? What?" Xiao Hua's face was first extremely pleasantly surprised, but soon after, it became abnormally awkward. He reached out to scratch his still somewhat bald head and help Fan Riguan up, saying, "This, Brother Fan." Hearing this, Fan Riguan's complexion greatly changed. He hurriedly said, "Taoist Master Xiao, please don't call me that. I'm just a mortal. I can't wait for Senior Immortal to call me that. Just call me Zhen." Zhen? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. He secretly said, "This has nothing to do with the 3 words Fan Riguan. This is my childhood name. Only mother and father can call me that. If Senior Immortal doesn't mind, you can call me that," Fan Riguan said with gratitude in his eyes. "This?" Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment, then slightly nodded. With the appearance of an enlightened expert, he said with a smile, "Since that's the case, I won't be polite. Looking at your appearance, your mother should be fine, right?" Fan Riguan was stunned. Soon after, he said with a smile, "Senior Immortal has misunderstood. When I was young, my biological father and mother had already passed away. The mother I'm talking about is my wife's mother." "Oh? For your wife's mother, you're actually pleading for others to take pity on her?" Xiao Hua was astonished. "I thought that she was your biological mother." "Yes. Although mother isn't my biological mother, and I also live in her family, mother raised me as her own. What does it matter if I give up a little face?" Fan Riguan said with a smile. "However, even if I give up my face, if I don't meet a Senior Immortal like Taoist Xiao who bemoans the state of the universe and the fate of mankind, then I can't help it." "But," Xiao Hua scratched his head, "the parasol pill is only an ordinary pill used to treat injuries. Even if the medicinal power is strong, how can it cure Fan Riguan's mother's chronic illness? It's really inconceivable. Could it be that Fan Riguan's mother has internal injuries? Not an illness? Zhen, can you tell I the process of your mother taking the pill?" Xiao Hua thought for a moment and asked. "That's exactly what I want Taoist Xiao to know," Fan Riguan quickly said. "Also, I still have some things to tell Senior Immortal." "Oh, tell me about the situation first." Xiao Hua directly ignored the latter part of the sentence. He really wanted to know why the parasol pill was effective. "That, yesterday when I received Taoist Zhao's immortal pill, I was pleasantly surprised. When I walked, it was as if I was stepping on clouds, my feet were soft. Perhaps Taoist Xiao doesn't know, but mother has been ill for a long time and the situation is not good. If there was no immortal pill, she might have passed away at any time. Therefore I wanted to send this immortal pill back. I almost couldn't wait until this morning," Fan Riguan said embarrassedly. "Coincidentally, There was a senior immortal who wanted to go to the west side of the city. I begged him and kowtowed in front of that senior immortal. That senior immortal reluctantly agreed to let me go. That shuttle is really fast. Last night was the first time I sat on a senior immortal's immortal item. It actually took less than an hour to reach the west side of the city. Taoist Xiao doesn't know, right? In the past, I had to walk for more than half a day. Fan Riguan's mood was obviously very good. His words were also very long-winded. However, Xiaohua was also very happy to share his joy and didn't interrupt. He had a smile on his face and didn't reveal any trace of anxiety in his heart. Oh, look at how happy I am. Where did I stop talking? Fan Riguan still wanted to say more, but he suddenly realized something and smiled apologetically. When I returned home, my wife, my daughter and mother were all very happy. When I couldn't wait to take out the immortal pill that Taoist Xiao bestowed, mother refused to take it no matter what. Ah? Why is that? Xiaohua blurted out. Fan Riguan's mother obviously didn't know that this parasol pill couldn't cure illness. How could she refuse to take it? Mother wanted my daughter to take it. Fan Riguan's eyes slowly revealed a trace of gratification. Jen, could it be? Your daughter is also sick? Xiaohua was stunned and immediately understood the meaning of Fan Riguan's words just now. She still wanted to ask for the parasol pill. No. Fan Riguan's face immediately turned red. He repeatedly waved his hand and said, My daughter is only 5 years old this year. How could she be sick? Oh, so it's like that. Xiaohua nodded and asked, Then, what happened next? Then, my daughter, of course, also refused to take the immortal pill. But mother only stuffed the immortal pill into her hand and didn't pay attention to it anymore. Fan Riguan sighed and continued. -5. Chapter 1308. Looking at mother's appearance, this elixir is definitely for my daughter to take. But, although my daughter is only 5 years old, she is still young. She gave the elixir to her mother, and insisted on my wife taking it. Fan Riguan glanced at Xiaohua and continued. Then, your wife's body is also unwell? Xiaohua suddenly understood. No, my wife is only 24 years old and has never been unwell. Who would have thought that? Fan Riguan would wave his hand again. That's strange, Xiaohua said with a smile. The medicinal pill this poor Taoist gave, although it's a medicinal pill used by us cultivators, it's also not a true immortal pill. Even if it's taken, it can't keep one from aging, let alone prolong one's lifespan. This? Fan Riguan hesitated for a moment, but still smiled apologetically and said, Taoist Master Xiao, this little one knows that immortal cultivators cut off the grudges of the mortal world, emphasizing on a pure heart and few desires. This little one might not understand the feelings between family members like this little one. As for the specific matters, this little one will not say too much. Taoist Master Xiao, just treat it as listening to a story. Oh? Xiaohua smiled and nodded slightly. Then, please continue. Yes, I will let the immortal know. How can my wife take this elixir? Naturally, she still pushed it to my mother, but my mother did not want to take it, so she pushed it back and forth. In the end, she could only think of a method of drawing straws. But just as this little one was about to make paper balls, my mother and my wife separately looked for this little one and gave this little one the same idea. What idea? Xiaohua was surprised, but in his heart, he was also moved by this family's love for each other. Sigh, it was very simple. Just make 3 identical paper balls with words. Whoever caught them would take the elixir. However, my mother let my daughter take the first one, and my wife let my mother take the first one. Yes, I understand. Xiaohua asked curiously. How did you deal with it? This little one could not. I used an ordinary pill as an elixir and let my daughter take it. Fan Riguan said embarrassedly. After all, my mother did not have much time left, and my daughter was still young. Then, why did you give the pill to your mother? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Actually, it's very simple. I put the elixir into the herbs that Mother usually takes and let my wife feed it to Mother. Fan Riguan smiled and said, If I knew it would be so troublesome, I wouldn't have told them at first. Trouble? Xiao Hua sighed. This kind of trouble. I hope it's everywhere in the world. Taoist Master Xiao is indeed different from the other immortals. Fan Riguan praised. If it were others, I'm afraid they would have been annoyed by my words. Hee, that's why I said that I's cultivation is shallow. Xiao Hua disagreed. My cultivation is shallow, but that's only for now. With spiritual Master Zhao's breadth of mind, it's only a matter of time before I advance to the spirit-severing stage. Fan Riguan said respectfully. Spirit-severing? Xiao Hua asked curiously. What realm is that? Realm? Fan Riguan's face immediately turned red. I'm just talking nonsense. I only heard the immortals chatting in the inn. They said that it's a higher cultivation than Jingguo City's City Lord Lu. Oh, is it spirit-severing stage? Xiao Hua suddenly remembered what Zhang Qishao said occasionally. Yes, it's spirit-severing stage. There's a Jinan immortal elder who said that spirit-severing stage is turning a baby into a primordial spirit. Those who can become spirit-severing stage are called spirit-severing stage or spirit-severing stage. Fan Riguan quickly explained. He didn't understand cultivation, so his explanation was a mess. However, he also let Xiao Hua know that the spirit-severing stage is the spirit-severing stage. Hee, little brother actually knows more than I, Xiao Hua said with a smile. What, it's just that I've been in the inn for a long time and heard a lot, Fan Riguan immediately said. Oh right, Taoist Master Zhao's immortal pill is really powerful. My mother just ate the herb, and immediately her stomach felt like it was being cut by a knife. Then her whole body was in pain. My mother's face was pale at that time, and her 7 orifices were all bleeding. Sigh, that's right, Xiao Hua secretly said. Sung pill is a pill used by cultivators. The meridians of the mortal world are weak, so of course they can't withstand it. Senior Bai is really right. I won't hide it from Taoist Master Xiao, I was also scared silly at that time. I even blamed Taoist Master Xiao in my heart. Fan Riguan looked at Xiao Hua and said embarrassedly. But I know that Taoist Master Xiao is a kind and compassionate person. You definitely won't lie to me, so I still believe in Taoist Master Xiao. As expected, in the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, when my mother spat out a few mouthfuls of dirty blood and didn't have any strength left, her face suddenly became rosy again. She only said that her body was incomparably comfortable. She actually effortlessly got up and let my wife prepare a bath. Ah? Incomparably comfortable? Xiao Hua was surprised. He somewhat didn't understand the meaning of this sentence. And I also asked my mother later. She said that there seemed to be a little mouse scurrying around in her body. Fan Riguan replied. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Isn't this the strange thing inside the Wu Tsung pill that sect master talked about? It's precisely this thing that made the Wu Tsung pill a top-quality pill. He remembered that those top-quality Wu Tsung pills that Xiao Yuehong refined were all kept by Xiao Yuehong himself. He didn't give them to him. When Xiao Hua looked at the Wu Tsung pills in the jade bottles that Xiao Xianrui gave him in his mind, he immediately understood the whole story. Immediately, Xiao Hua's tears fell like rain. Trouble didn't only exist in the mortal world. It still existed in the cold and merciless world of cultivators. Taoist Master Xiao! Taoist Master Xiao! Seeing this, Fan Riguan was greatly alarmed. He hurriedly waved his hand. This kind of immortal pill. I don't dare to be greedy. Bullshit. Xiao Hua immediately stomped his feet and jumped up. He pointed at Fan Riguan and scolded. Your family's son knows to give the medicinal pill to his mother. How can this poor Taoist be stingy with this insignificant medicinal pill? You bastard, you're really gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Looking at that flustered and exasperated appearance, how could he still be a cultivator's senior immortal? Seeing that Xiaohua was angry, Fan Riguan was so frightened that he immediately knelt down. Daoist Xiao, don't be anxious. Daoist Xiao, don't be anxious. Who am I anxious with? Do I need to be anxious with you? Xiaohua suddenly felt sorrow from the bottom of his heart. He looked up at the sky and said angrily, The heavens are unfair. Who's causing trouble? An angry shout descended from the sky. A very strange figure, like a real shadow, floated up from the ripples of the nearby lake and flew towards where Xiaohua was standing. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. He immediately restrained his somewhat frantic emotions. He looked over and saw that the shadow was holding a sickle-like object in its hand. Its appearance was the same as the image he saw in the hologram when he entered Jinghua City. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Fan Riguan immediately stepped forward and bowed very respectfully. I'm Fan Riguan from Flying Fish Inn. Greetings, sir. What's going on here? Why is there someone shouting? The shadow's figure was still bent, like a ribbon flying in the air. It's me who angered this Senior Immortal. Senior Immortal scolded me. I'm apologizing to Senior Immortal. It's not a big deal. Fan Riguan slightly glanced at Xiaohua and gave him a meaningful glance. Xiaohua took a deep breath and wiped away the tears on his face. He cupped his hands and said, I was a bit reckless. Please forgive me. Oh. The shadow floated in the air for a moment. A wooden voice echoed. Although Fan Riguan is an ordinary person, he's still a servant in Jinghua City. His safety is protected. Fellow Taoist, you can't rashly decide to take someone's life. I don't dare, and it's good that you don't dare. Shouting is nothing. However, City Lord Zhao is receiving a distinguished guest today. He's touring Jinghua City. If you disturb him, it'll be a capital offense. It's best if you know your place. I understand. Xiaohua's heart trembled. He thought of the nascent soul cultivator he met outside the city 2 days ago. Take care of yourself. The shadow was like a fluttering ribbon. It gradually went far away and fell into the lake. After a long while, Fan Riguan stood up and said in a low voice, Taoist Master Xiao, please don't speak loudly again. Please follow me to Flying Fish Inn. Xiaohua nodded. Just as he was about to take a step, he thought of something again and shook his head, saying, I should stay at another inn. I'm afraid I can't stay at Flying Fish Inn. Why? Fan Riguan stared blankly and asked shortly after. Yesterday there was a waiter who asked I for the so-called Immortal Dao. If I follow you back, won't I be noisy to death? Xiaohua sighed. In his heart, he was actually still afraid that the refining talisman school's people would discover that he was a loose cultivator. So it's like that. Fan Riguan immediately understood. He said very guiltily, I was reckless. I didn't expect that my sudden departure would bring Taoist Master Xiao so much trouble. I'm truly ashamed. There's no need to be like this. It's not all your fault. Xiaohua looked at the sky and said with a smile, I's matter with you is over. If you don't have anything else, I will look for another inn. Let's part ways here. Xiaohua figured out that Fan Riguan's mother's illness was cured because of his top-grade Wuqing pill. Naturally, he also knew the use of those Wuqing pills in the space. The most important thing was that these pills were refined by Xiao Yuehong. Since Fan Riguan's wife and daughter didn't have any incurable illnesses, he naturally didn't want to waste these pills. Fan Riguan heard this and became anxious. He stepped forward and pulled Xiaohua's sleeve. He said with a smile, Taoist Master Xiao, I have a presumptuous request. I don't know if I should say it. Alas, since it's a presumptuous request, of course there's no need to say it. Xiaohua shook his head. Yes, Taoist Master Xiao is right. Fan Riguan said respectfully. However, my mother knew that it was Taoist Master Xiao who bestowed the immortal pills and wanted to thank you in person. It's just that we mortals can only stay in the western part of Jinghua City and can't come here as we please. Therefore, I came here in a hurry to invite Taoist Master Xiao to come to the western part of my city when you have time and accept my family's thanks. No need. Xiao Hua waved his hand and shook his head. It's an unintentional act. You don't have to thank me. If you have the heart, just properly show filial piety to my mother. -5. Chapter 1309. Wait a moment, Taoist Xiao, Fan Riguan said anxiously. Actually. Then he looked left and right. This street was remote, and there were only a few small shops on the side. He didn't see anyone going in or out. Only then did he lower his voice and say, My mother has something very important to tell Taoist Xiao. It seems that my mother also has something to thank Taoist Xiao. Eh? You are not a person of the secular world. What do you have that cultivators like us would like? Xiao Hua said with a frown. Taoist Xiao, I am naturally very ordinary. But my wife's family has some stories about their ancestors. Oh? Is it about your wife and your daughter? Xiao Hua seemed to understand. Yes, it is indeed so. My mother said that it is rare to see a loose cultivator like Taoist Xiao who gives immortal pills to ordinary people without even asking. If Taoist Xiao still can't believe it, then no cultivator in this world can. Only an immortal cultivator like Taoist Master Xiao, who is sincere and caring, can be entrusted to me, can be worthy of my mother's thanks, Fan Riguan said sincerely. Hearing this, Xiao Hua's face turned a little red. It was only because he had just entered this so-called cultivation world for 3 years that he had yet to truly experience the cruelty of the cultivation world. In his heart, he still had a simple and honest heart. Entrusted? Xiao Hua's face was red and his heart was moved. He said with a smile, You have a good idea. Could it be that you have something good to exchange for eyes 2 pills? This time, it was Fan Riguan's turn to blush. However, Fan Riguan clenched his teeth and knelt down in front of Xiao Hua again. He kowtowed and said, This lowly one is somewhat shameless. Since Taoist Xiao has already given me the pills, I shouldn't ask for more. But Taoist Xiao, please be merciful. The pills are extremely casual in Taoist Xiao's hands, but in my eyes they are immortal pills that can save my family. Taoist Xiao, please come to my house. If Taoist Xiao doesn't like the things my mother takes out, Taoist Xiao can leave. What do you think? Xiao Hua's curiosity was immediately piqued. He helped him up and asked curiously, Jian, didn't you just say that your wife and your daughter are not sick? Why are you asking for medicinal pills now? Fan Riguan sighed and said, Sai, I'm glad you know that even if you're not sick, you'll get the same illness as my mother when you're 50 years old. Eh? That's strange? Xiao Hua's heart stirred. He smiled and said, Isn't that easy? Now that we know, we can just find someone else to do it again. Hee, Taoist Master Xiao, please don't mock me. I know that I can't judge Taoist Master Tao's age from your appearance. However, you don't look old. You may not be able to understand this kind of familial affection in the mortal world. Even if I have a wife at home, I'm not willing to abandon her. Love is stronger than gold. Xiao Hua couldn't help but smile. He wasn't someone who would spoil the mood. Blocking Fan Riguan's line of sight, he waved his hand and took out 2 parasol pills. Handing them over, he said, This medicinal pill, to be honest, it's of great significance to I. I've already decided not to use it, but after hearing what you said, if I don't do anything, my heart won't be at peace. Won't I ruin my cultivation? Take this pill and give it to your wife and daughter to consume. Who knew that Fan Riguan wasn't like what he thought? He pushed Xiao Hua's hand and said resolutely, When we came, Mother already said that if Taoist Master Xiao doesn't personally go, I definitely can't accept this medicinal pill. Ah? So it's like this. Xiao Hua was a little surprised. Yes, Mother's orders, I definitely won't dare to disobey. Fan Riguan nodded. Then, all right. Xiao Hua accepted the parasol pills. He looked around and said with a smile, I still have some matters to attend to at the store over there. You follow me. Oh no, you should wait here. Wait for me to exchange some spirit stones, then I'll go with you to the west of the city. Yes, I'll listen to Taoist Master Zhao's instructions. Hearing this, Fan Riguan's face was filled with joy. He looked at where Xiao Hua was pointing and asked with concern. Senior Immortal is going to the store to exchange for spirit stones? Spirit stones? Oh, yes. Xiao Hua nodded. Then, will Senior Immortal use spirit stones to cultivate or exchange for other things? Fan Riguan continued to ask. Spirit stones can be used to cultivate? Xiao Hua was stunned. Fan Riguan was even more shocked. Taoist Master Xiao won't use spirit stones to cultivate? Xiao Hua scratched his head. Didn't I tell you that I's cultivation is shallow? I don't know how to use spirit stones to cultivate. Oh, so it's like this. Then Taoist Master Xiao will use spirit stones to exchange for things? Yes. Then Senior Immortal, it's best not to use things to exchange for spirit stones in these stores and then use spirit stones to buy things in the stores. Eh? Why is that? Could it be that Senior Immortal doesn't know about Jinghua City's e-market? Fan Riguan asked curiously. I naturally know about e-market, but isn't it still early for e-market? Xiao Hua was a little embarrassed. Oh, so it's like this. Then Taoist Master Xiao should go to e-market to take a look. E-market is different from e-market. E-market only opens once a month, but e-market opens every day at noon. I also heard from other senior immortals in the inn that instead of using things to exchange for spirit stones in the stores and then going to other stores to exchange for things, it's better to directly take things from e-market and use things to exchange for things. Although there are some stores in Jinghua City that have a good reputation, they still need to make a profit. Their prices are all low and high. It's not worth it for Taoist Master Xiao to look for them. Ah? There's such a thing. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Wouldn't it be a big loss for him to pass through two stores like this? At the same time, he also thought of the e-market. That the boy in the refining glyph school whose cultivation was higher than his mentioned in the store. At this time, it was already afternoon. Presumably that e-market had already dispersed. If Xiao Hua didn't go to e-market, then naturally there was nothing else to do. All right, I will go with you to the west of the city. However, when you come back tomorrow, you still need to bring I to e-market. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Taoist Master Xiao saved my mother. I can't repay you even if I have to sacrifice my life. Senior Immortal, if there's anything you need, you can instruct me. Fan Riguan said with great joy. Then, he looked at the sky and said with slight hesitation. Taoist Master Xiao, if we go to the west of the city now, it's a bit late. We might not be able to arrive by nightfall. Then, even if we go to e-market tomorrow, I'm afraid it's still not possible to go to the west of the city. Xiao Hua frowned and said, unless we leave early tomorrow morning. Really? Fan Riguan said embarrassedly. Right, I heard from the waiter in the Flying Fish Inn that you and a fellow cultivator went to the west of the city on some shuttle boat. It's very fast. Xiao Hua suddenly thought of something. Yes, the shuttle boat is indeed fast, but the cost of spirit stones is also considerable. I don't have any reason to waste your spirit stones. Fan Riguan immediately objected. Then how many spirit stones will it take to go to the west of the city? According to Senior Immortal, it should be a mid-grade spirit stone. A mid-grade spirit stone. Xiao Hua also underestimated it in his heart. His high-grade fireball talisman could only be exchanged for a mid-grade spirit stone. To be honest, he was a bit reluctant to part with it. But thinking about it again, he was waiting here for Tianqi Qingfingnin's message. If there was suddenly news that Huayun Park had enough talisman masters, he might not have the time. This mid-grade spirit stone might really have to be spent. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua suddenly seemed to feel that something was wrong, but after thinking for a while, he couldn't figure out what it was, so he had to stop thinking about it. He only said to Fan Riguan, This poor Taoist's time is limited. I'm afraid I can't stay in Jinghua City for long. Take this poor Taoist to the shuttle. This poor Taoist can still afford the immortal stones. Thank you. Taoist Master Xiao. Fan Riguan was very grateful. He quickly took Xiaohua to the lake in front of them. Seeing the empty lake and the small boat that was gliding along the surface of the lake not far away, Xiaohua was a little surprised. Fan Riguan was very experienced. He walked to the front of a very ordinary-looking stone pillar and said respectfully, "Taoist Master Xiao, please inject your spirit energy into this jade stone." Xiaohua walked over and sized it up. This is a 3 feet tall, 1-inch square jade stone pillar. It was gray and not very conspicuous. Only the top of the pillar was protruding and there were some faintly discernible strange runes on it. Xiaohua stretched out his finger and exerted his strength, pointing at the top of the jade pillar. The lake in front of him immediately began to bubble, and countless tiny waves swarmed out from the bottom of the lake. Immediately after, a faint blue light flashed, and a small boat that was 3 feet long and 3 feet wide appeared at the edge of the lake where the waves were surging. After the small boat appeared, the lake regained its calm. Fan Riguan said happily, "The shuttle boat has appeared. Taoist Master Xiao, please move." "Okay." Xiaohua agreed. He lifted his leg and got on the shuttle boat. Fan Riguan followed behind him. "Taoist Master Xiao, please inject your spirit stone into this groove." Fan Riguan pointed at a circular groove in the middle of the shuttle boat and said, Xiaohua said as he placed a mid-grade spirit stone into the groove. Following the insertion of the mid-grade spirit stone, the groove shone with a brilliant light, covering the groove. The mid-grade spirit stone disappeared, and then, a faint blue light screen rose from the surroundings of the shuttle, covering Xiaohua and Fan Riguan within. Immediately after, in front of Xiaohua and Fan Riguan, several different colored light balls appeared in midair. Xiaohua glanced at them. Different words appeared on them, such as east of the city, west of the city, north of the city, south of the city. Fan Riguan said from the side, "Taoist Master Xiao, please use your spirit energy to point at the west of the city." Xiaohua did as he was told. The several balls of light in front of him disappeared, and a huge diagram appeared once again. There were many tiny light spots on the diagram, making Xiaohua confused. Beside him, Fan Riguan said in a low voice, "Taoist Master Xiao, I'll have to trouble you to use your immortal power here." As he spoke, he pointed at an extremely small light dot on the left side of the diagram. Xiaohua very strangely sent his spirit energy to that light dot. Immediately after, several fist-sized words flew out from the diagram. It was Jingfanqi. "This is the place where this lowly, secular people live." Fan Riguan smiled apologetically. -5. Chapter 13:10. "Oh?" Xiaohua nodded. He now understood that the second image that appeared just now should be the image of the entire western part of Jinghua City. The countless tiny dots of light were also the places that the shuttle could reach. However, it seems that there are no dots of light around Jingfanqi. Moreover, this area is especially big. It takes up almost 60% of the western part of the city. Xiaohua was a little confused. He pointed at the area and asked, "Jen, these places can't be reached by shuttle." Reporting to Taoist Xiao, the place that Taoist Xiao pointed to just now is the only place where the shuttle can reach Jingfanqi. Any further inside is where the people of the secular world live. The shuttle can't enter. The shuttle can't enter such a big place? Xiaohua asked curiously. Exactly. The people of the secular world can't be compared to the immortals. Jingfanqi is surrounded by an immortal array. No one without an immortal talisman can come out. This is also the reason why my mother can't personally come to thank Taoist Xiao, Fan Riguan explained. Moreover, there are many people of the secular world in the western part of the city. I'm afraid there are more of them than the immortals. That's why they occupy most of the western part of the city. Oh, I see. Xiaohua nodded. He then looked at the shuttle and said, "Now that we know the place, how should I steer the shuttle?" The shuttle doesn't need to be controlled by the immortals. You just need to choose the place you want to go, then use your immortal energy to activate the immortal stones that were placed on the shuttle. The shuttle will follow the route set by Jinghua City and fly to the place you want to go. Haha, I see. That's not bad. Xiaohua was still worrying about how to not get lost. When he heard this, he laughed and sent his immortal energy into the groove where the immortal stones were. As expected, the shuttle moved slowly. Then, it gradually accelerated and flew over the lake toward the western part of the city. Xiaohua stood on the shuttle. The light blue brilliance blocked all the waves and gales outside. Moreover, the shuttle was unusually stable. There were no bumps. It was no different from standing on the ground. Hee, this shuttle is really strange. If it's just one or two, then that's fine. They're just ordinary magic tools. But what's rare is that all the lakes in Jinghua City are filled with shuttles. I'm afraid there are tens of thousands of them? Xiaohua's mind had already calmed down. He looked at the shuttle under his feet with interest, as well as the many different colored shuttles on the lake. Although the surface of the lake was vast, there were even more shuttles. Within a radius of about 10 zhang around Xiaohua, there were 2 shuttles moving in the same direction. From time to time, there would be shuttles flashing past Xiaohua's left side, either in front of the shuttles or behind the shuttles. Their speed was extremely fast, and the distance of 10 zhang was covered in the blink of an eye. Many times, Xiaohua felt that they would collide with each other. Seeing Xiaohua clench his fists, Fan Riguan behind him takes half a step forward and says in a low voice, "Taoist Master Xiao, don't be afraid, this shuttle's route is already fixed, all the shuttles won't collide with each other." Why would I be afraid? I was just admiring the scenery of Jinghua City. Can't you slow down a bit? Xiaohua wouldn't admit it. He only smiles and says, but before he can finish, a shuttle suddenly appears in front of his eyes, giving him a fright. Fan Riguan smiles and doesn't say anything. Jen, tell I about Jinghua City. Xiaohua feels that he can hold his face and asks. Yes, Taoist Master Xiao. Fan Riguan smiles and answers respectfully. However, this little one is only immortal in Jinghua City. I only know that there are 2 old immortals in Jinghua City. One is old immortal Mu Chang, the other is the city lord of Jinghua City, immortal Lu Yichuan. These 2 old immortals have been in charge of Jinghua City for several hundred years. As for other things, this little one doesn't know much about the matters of the immortals. I heard a lot from the immortals in the inn, so I'm afraid I can't get to the point. You can say whatever you want, I can also listen. Xiaohua says. Yes, this little one lives in the west of Jinghua City. My parents died when I was young. Fan Riguan knows that Xiaohua wants to know more, so he tells him everything he knows bit by bit. As it turns out, Jinghua City is divided into 4 areas, namely the west, east, south, and north of the city. The west of the city is for the common people to live in. There are about 1 million people there. Every year, Jinghua City will send special disciples to the west of the city to select children around 6 years old who can cultivate. They will be accepted as disciples of Jinghua City, and the families of these disciples will be moved to the east of the city. Naturally, the life in the east of the city and the west of the city is very different. Every person in the west of the city hopes that they can raise a child who can become a disciple of Jinghua City, so that they can live a life like an immortal. Because Jinghua City is very big, many things are not necessarily done by disciples with high cultivation. Therefore, even if a considerable number of disciples can't set foot in the 3rd level of qi refining, they are different from the cultivation sections. Their cultivation is not abolished and they are chased down the mountain, but they are made disciples who do odd jobs. However, disciples who can pass the 3rd level of qi refining have their families in the east of the city, and their families will have a new residence, so they will be separated from the other disciples who do odd jobs. Of course, there are also many places in Jinghua City that need the common people to work. These opportunities are open to the common people in the west of the city at any time. Fan Riguan belongs to this kind of people. He stands out among the common people in the west of the city, and has the opportunity to serve the immortals in the Flying Fish Inn in the south of the city. Fan Riguan doesn't know much about the north and south of Jinghua City. He only knows that the south of the city is a place where low-level cultivators move. Qi refining and foundation establishment cultivators can only stay in the south of the city. only high-level cultivators, Oris core stage and above, can enter the north of the city. As for what the north of the city looks like, Fan Riguan has no idea at all. After all, those who stay in the Flying Fish Inn are all rogue cultivators or chi refining stage cultivators like Xiaohua. They have no chance to enter the north of the city, so it is impossible for them to talk about it. However, Fan Riguan has heard from the 10th level chi refining stage shopkeeper of the Flying Fish Inn that the north of the city seems to be abnormally rich in spiritual chi of heaven and earth. At the same time, it is also the place where the leader of Jinghua City is located. According to Fan Riguan, entering Jinghua City was also based on one's cultivation level. Xiaohua entered through the southern city gate. Mortals couldn't enter or leave, but cultivators could enter or leave as long as they were cultivators. As for the other city gates, aura refining and foundation building cultivators couldn't enter or leave. Moreover, the 4 areas of Jinghua City are protected by their own immortal formations. Random people have to check their cultivation. If they don't meet the requirements, they will have to force their way in. The disciples of Jinghua City can punish them according to the city rules. Fan Riguan said a lot of bits and pieces, and Xiaohua listened to them one by one. When they talked about cultivation, Xiaohua's heart moved. He smiled and said, "That's right. What's the deal with the camouflage of Qiqiao sect? Where can I buy it?" Camouflage? Fan Riguan was surprised at first, but then he understood. He smiled apologetically and said, "That's what the Immortals use. Naturally, you have to buy it from Qiqiao sect's shop in the north of the city. Didn't you say that only Golden Core stage cultivators can go to the north of the city? I see a lot of cultivators wearing camouflage in the south of the city. Let me tell you, Taoist Xiao. Qiqiao sect's camouflage is very precious. According to many immortals, it has many functions and is very expensive. I'm afraid you have to use some top-grade immortal stones to buy it." "What? Top-grade spirit stones?" Xiaohua was shocked. "Aren't there only low-grade, middle-grade, and high-grade spirit stones?" Fan Riguan shook his head blankly. "I don't know about that. After all, I only heard about it from rumors." Then he explained. "However, according to what I know, other than Qiqiao sect's camouflage, many other sects have also introduced similar things. They are also called camouflage, and the price is also much lower. If Taoist Xiao wants to hide your identity, you might as well consider these camouflage." "Eh? Compared to Qiqiao sect's camouflage, what's the difference?" Xiaohua smiled bitterly. How could a mortal like Fan Riguan know about this? Sure enough, Fan Riguan smiled apologetically and said, "I don't know the specific differences. I only know that there are differences in concealing immortals' cultivation and appearance." "Appearance?" Xiaohua nodded. "Then according to what you know, it should be able to conceal one's appearance, right?" "Of course. Concealing one's appearance is the most basic. Otherwise, how could it be called a camouflage?" Fan Riguan saw that Xiaohua was very interested and knew what he was thinking. He said, "These camouflage can be bought from Qiqiao sect's shop or from other sects' shops. Of course, the other sect's camouflage won't be as expensive as Qiqiao sect's. Moreover, you can occasionally find camouflage in trading markets or trading gatherings. However, it all depends on luck. I heard that the items used for trading are extremely rare and not easy to find. If Taoist Xiao wants to get a cheap camouflage, I'm afraid you'll have to go to trading gatherings." Xiaohua nodded. He already understood that the camouflage was extremely difficult for him to obtain. He only had 100 or so middle-grade spirit stones in his storage pouch. "Let's not talk about that for now." Xiaohua glanced at the rapidly receding scene on the shore of the lake and asked, "Can you talk about the matter of your wife and your daughter? So that I can have a plan in mind?" "This?" Fan Riguan hesitated for a moment and nodded. "The matter of my wife and daughter, I actually already knew about it before I entered the Zhu family." "Oh, right, my wife and mother are both surnamed Zhu. I can be considered to have married into the family. My daughter is also surnamed Zhu." Xiaohua listened and nodded slightly. However, at this moment, the entire shuttle suddenly shook violently. A huge wave of water violently threw the shuttle into the air. Not to mention Fan Riguan, even Xiaohua was caught off guard and lost his balance. He curled up and crashed into the light barrier in front of him. -5. Chapter 13:11. While Xiaohua was asking about Fan Riguan, the shuttle under his feet was suddenly lifted up by the huge waves on the lake and thrown high into the air. Xiaohua himself was also thrown straight towards the light shield on the opposite side. Similarly, Fan Riguan was also thrown towards him from the opposite direction. The two people were inevitably going to collide in midair. If it was an ordinary cultivator, let alone a second-level qi refining cultivator, even if it was a foundation establishment cultivator, under the situation where they didn't use their transcendence energy, wouldn't they also be flustered and barely mobilize their transcendence energy to cast a spell? Even if they could save themselves, Fan Riguan probably couldn't save them. Xiaohua was different. In a hurry, he didn't have time to take out a flying talisman from his storage pouch. He also didn't have any technique to float in the air. Although he was a little busy, his hands and feet weren't slow at all. It was simply faster than he thought. It was unknown what Xiaohua's hands and feet did, but his whole body immediately recovered its balance. Moreover, when Fan Riguan was about to crash into him, Xiaohua slightly raised his hand and grabbed Fan Riguan's neck. His hand gently stopped Fan Riguan from flying diagonally. Then, Xiaohua's figure lightly floated to the ground. Fan Riguan's face was pale as he stood steadily on the flying shuttle in the air. Xiaohua's series of movements were like moving clouds and flowing water, as if he didn't see the smoke and fire of the mortal world. It was as if there was a spell activated by transcendence energy. As soon as he stepped on the shuttle, Fan Riguan hurriedly thanked him. Before he could finish speaking, there was a "pa" sound and the shuttle fell on the lake again. It violently undulated up and down, but it didn't float forward even half an inch. "Huh! What's going on?" Xiaohua raised his head in surprise. The entire lake was still rippling. There were many different colored shuttles around Xiaohua, but like Xiaohua, they only undulated in place and didn't float. "Ah Jen, do you know what's going on?" Xiaohua asked curiously. "This little one doesn't know. This little one is sitting on very few immortal things." Just as Fan Riguan was replying, the light shield above the shuttle scattered down, revealing Xiaohua and Fan Riguan on the surface of the lake. A burst of water vapor and a gust of wind blew over, making Xiaohua and Fan Riguan's faces wet, and their clothes fluttered in the wind. At this time, about 10 feet in front of the shuttle, a water curtain slowly rose up. A Jinghua city disciple's figure appeared in the water curtain. "Fellow Taoists, our city lord is accompanying a distinguished guest on a tour of Jinghua City. Please wait a moment. Please be magnanimous and forgive us." A clear and melodious voice came from the water curtain, echoing in Xiaohua's ears. "Honored guest sightseeing?" Xiaohua frowned, immediately recalling the warning he received from the Jinghua city disciple on the street just now. Before he could think about it carefully, a string of music that made one feel relaxed and happy came from extremely far away. At first, it was as soft as a mosquito, but soon after, it became louder, as if many people were playing a celestial song in front of him. However, even if Xiaohua used his eyes, he still could not find the source of this celestial music. "Huh! Over there!" Although he couldn't see anything unusual with his naked eyes, Xiaohua still raised his eyes and looked towards the north. He saw a tricolored light slowly flying over from the north. It seemed to be moving very slowly, but in a flash, it was already in front of him. It was a dragon-shaped flying boat. The flying boat was quite tall, but it was transparent. The people on the flying boat could be seen clearly by the people in the lake, as if the flying boat didn't exist. The flying boat wasn't flying in the sky. Below the flying boat, there were several feet of clouds floating above the lake. The clouds flowed more rapidly than the water, pushing the flying boat forward rapidly. Xiaohua's eyes were sharp. He had already seen clearly that there were more than 10 foundation establishment cultivators standing on the dragon head of the flying boat. Each of them held a sword-shaped magic tool in their hands. Their faces were tense as they looked forward. There were also cultivators on both sides of the flying boat, but these cultivators' magic tools were in the shape of a receptor. In the center of these cultivators was an enormous platform. On the platform, there were several beautiful women with graceful figures. Their cultivations were also at the late stage of chi refining and early stage of foundation establishment. They either held a feather fan in their hands or a wine jug in their hands. They clustered around 3 people sitting cross-legged in the center of the platform. Looking at the 3 people, the one at the top was an old man with white hair and a red face. He wore a purple-red Taoist robe and sat very casually. He held a strange golden wine cup in his left hand and pointed at something in the lake with his right hand. This old man was the famous Old Man Mu Chang of Jinghua City. On Old Man Mu Chang's left hand was an extremely handsome boy. He wore a luxurious robe, his face was as white as jade, and he had a purple gold crown on his head. He was holding a bunch of spirit fruits that looked like grapes in his hand and carefully tasting them with an expressionless face. This almost young boy was the city lord of Jinghua City, Lu Yichuan. Looking at the opposite side of City Lord Lu, there was a middle-aged man about 40 years old. He had a horse face with many pockmarks on his face. In the middle of the pockmarks was a very conspicuous brandy nose. It was the 3rd elder of the Blue sect, Taoist Master Zhuiming. At this time, Taoist Master Zhuiming was also holding a wine cup in his hand. His Taoist robe was open at his chest, and he seemed to be drinking to his heart's content. His gaze was directed at the direction Old Man Mu Chang was pointing at. Xiao Hua looked from afar and thought to himself, "This is the so-called nascent soul cultivator? Looks like it's just strange, but there's nothing special about it." Xiao Hua had just thought of this when an incomparably majestic pressure pressed down on him like a mountain and like a huge wave hitting the shore. In an instant, Xiao Hua felt that his entire body was incomparably heavy. That pressure pressed down on his entire body. Even his fingers and toes were unable to move a single inch. What's more, Xiao Hua's mind was as if exposed. His mouth and nose were immersed in the pressure, making him unable to think, unable to breathe. With a plop sound behind Xiao Hua, the mortal Fan Riguan had long been unable to resist the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator. He shouted, "Old Immortal!" and couldn't help but kneel on the ground, truly prostrating himself on all fours. This is the divine ability of a nascent soul cultivator. It's simply unbelievable. Xiao Hua, who had some doubts just now, was completely shocked in his heart. There was no need to talk about fighting. Just based on this pressure, Xiao Hua believed that as long as the 3 people on the dragon boat wanted his life, they only needed to wave their hands and he definitely wouldn't have any strength to fight back. Not to mention me, even if the sect master were here, I'm afraid he wouldn't be a match for them in 3 rounds. Xiao Hua had already deeply understood the fearsomeness of a nascent soul cultivator. At the same time, he also understood that when Xiao Yuehong mentioned the nascent soul sect masters of the 3 great cultivation sects in the country of Xi, his tone was filled with admiration, jealousy, and a bit of fear. Foundation establishment. Gold core, compared to the nascent soul stage, the difference was really too great. Suddenly, Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a burst of blazing passion, as if he had seen some hope. That's right, it's exactly like this. It's precisely because of this cultivation that I can avenge the sect master. I can move unhindered in this whatever country of Xi, in this whatever continent of dawn reign. Only then can I possibly find my own origin and origin. Xiao Hua let out a cry from his heart. Sect master, this disciple finally understands your words. Only by becoming a great cultivator can I have my own freedom and do whatever I want. Rest assured, this disciple will definitely not be afraid of hardships and dangers. I will definitely use all my means to cultivate to the nascent soul stage. I will definitely personally crush the 100 Herbs sect, Jiang Fan, Jiang Jiantong, and the others to death one by one, so as to avenge you and let you rest in peace in the underworld. The dragon boat was moving extremely fast. Xiao Hua had just seen the 3 nascent soul cultivators on the dragon boat, and was thinking so much in his heart, when the dragon boat had already flown past Xiaohua's shuttle boat at an extremely fast speed. Soon after, the extremely terrifying pressure was like the receding tide of the sea, suddenly disappearing. Xiaohua felt his body become lighter, and his heart also relaxed. When he turned his head to look again, the three-colored flying boat had already gradually moved further away and could only be vaguely seen. The head of a dragon can be seen, but the tail cannot be seen. Isn't this what it looks like? Xiaohua sighed with emotion. With a pu sound, the light blue light around the shuttle once again rose up and surrounded the entire shuttle. It slightly shook a few times, and just like before, the shuttle flew forward at an extremely fast speed. On the surface of the lake, all the shuttles also began to move as if nothing had happened just a moment ago. Behind Xiaohua, Fan Riguan was still lying on the ground. His shoulders were slightly trembling, and he still hadn't escaped from the fright from a moment ago. Xiaohua knew that the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator was extremely powerful. It must have left an extremely deep impression in Fan Riguan's heart. In a short period of time, he probably wouldn't be able to recover his previous state of mind. Therefore, Xiaohua didn't say anything and just stood there quietly. Looking ahead, his heart once again surged with monstrous waves. I naturally want to cultivate to the nascent soul stage, but the current situation is extremely bad. I only have the cultivation method of the second level of qi refining. If I want to continue cultivating, I need to find the cultivation method for the future. Let's not talk about the cultivation method for the foundation establishment stage. I must obtain the cultivation method for the 12th level of qi refining. But cultivation methods are incomparably precious in the country of Xi. Usually, I may not be able to obtain it. No, I definitely can't obtain it. And if I enter another sect, my aptitude seems strange. I'm afraid it won't be easy. So, Heaven's Forsaken seems to be the only way out right now. As long as I can pass Senior Qing's test on the art of talisman crafting, I can obtain the cultivation method for the 5th level of qi refining. This young master can even refine a high-grade fireball talisman, not to mention a low-grade one. Ah? Oh no, how could I be so muddle-headed? Thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. Although he could refine a high-grade fireball talisman, this kind of miraculous method, could he display it in front of others? If he wanted to enter Heaven's Forsaken, his only chance was to use a talisman brush to refine a low-grade fireball talisman. -5. Chapter 13:12. Although Xiaohua can refine high-grade fireball talismans, he absolutely can't let others know about this. After all, his method of refining yellow talismans is somewhat unimaginable. He can only use talisman brushes to refine low-grade fireball talismans in order to meet the requirements of joining Tianqi. Alas, it's really like drawing legs on a snake. Xiaohua rubbed his chin, unconsciously smiling bitterly as he said. Forcefully returning that low-grade talisman brush to Senior Tian was precisely to make him believe that the high-grade fireball talisman wasn't refined by himself. This lack of confidence isn't ordinary at all. Now I've lost 20 low-grade spirit stones for no reason, and now I have to buy a low-grade talisman brush. I'm just finding something for myself to do. Forget it, don't think so much first. When I return to the southern part of the city tomorrow, I'd better find a shop to buy a talisman brush. If Tianqi sends a summoning talisman and I can't refine yellow talismans normally, then it'll be troublesome. Right, my cultivation relied on the Peiyuan pill to push from the first layer of the aura refining realm to the second layer of the aura refining realm. Taking the Peiyuan pill is equivalent to 12 years of bitter cultivation. If I go from the second layer of the aura refining realm to the third layer of the aura refining realm, how many years of bitter cultivation do I have to take? Can I still use the Peiyuan pill? Xiaohua frowns and thinks. Chang Huaming is already gone, and everything in Yellow Flower Ridge has been taken away by my enemy. I can't easily get pills anymore. If I want to take pills, I'll have to rely on myself. And, since I can refine yellow talismans that I've never learned before, then I think about the extremely familiar spells in Xihua Peak's pill room. Presumably, I can also refine pills. Even if I can't refine pills now, I still have to collect as many pill recipes as I can. I need to collect things for pill refining in the future. Loose cultivators, everything depends on oneself. Everything is cruel. Right, 100 Jiang Peak. Kaijwuxia's matter, do I still have to go? Xiaohua thought about the matter of cultivation techniques, then he thought about Kaijwuxia and the 100 Jiang Peak. Previously, I had a disciple of the sect. The sect head had a cultivation technique, so I naturally didn't need to go to the 100 Jiang Peak and risk my life. But now, I've already become a loose cultivator, and I'm even inferior to Kaijwuxia. If I can go to 1000 Jiang Peak and coincidentally obtain Old Man 1000 Jiang's inheritance, wouldn't I no longer have to rack my brains to find all the cultivation methods in the future? But Kaijwuxia is at the 5th level of qi refining. She also needs a technique like this. She must have noticed that my cultivation base is too low to compete with hers, so she invited me to go with her. Even if I have a secret technique to break through her cultivation base, she already knows about it. She'll definitely be on her guard. How could I possibly have an advantage? Since you can't snatch it from him, why should you destroy the trust that the two of you have worked so hard to build? Sigh, forget it, I won't go. In any case, my cultivation speed is too slow. Just relying on Tian Qi's cultivation method is more than enough. Why should I think about other things? If Kaijwuxia's luck is good, then I'll let her obtain Old Man 1000 Zhang's inheritance, and revitalize their Kai family of Luyang. His eyes blankly stared at the lingering mist in front of him. His eyes gradually became clear. Everyone's cultivation path has its own characteristics. Simply copying another person's path may not necessarily be successful. I must have my own path. All of a sudden, Xiaohua became extremely interested in the reward that Fan Riguan's mother wanted to give him. He didn't know what it was, and he also didn't know if it would have any effect on his cultivation. He turned his head to look at Fan Riguan. Although he had already stood up from the ground, his eyes were still somewhat lifeless. The pressure of a nascent soul cultivator was still too shocking for ordinary people. Without a period of time to recover, Fan Riguan's mind wouldn't be able to escape from the shock. For a moment, Xiaohua also didn't want to ask him anything. Just like this, the two of them remained silent, allowing the shuttle to quickly advance on the surface of the lake. Time passed very quickly. When the bright red sun set in the west, a black line appeared in front of Xiaohua's eyes. It was precisely the end of the lake. That black line was getting closer. When he could clearly see that it was the countless houses built along the lakeside. Turning his head to look at Fan Riguan, Xiaohua thought for a moment. He slightly frowned and shouted with a trace of magic power in his voice. Ah Jen ah? When the wooden chicken Fan Riguan heard Xiaohua shout, he suddenly woke up with a start. His sluggish eyes faintly moved and regained some spirit. Immediately after, he looked left and right in panic and said in a low voice, Daoist Xiao, have the old immortals all left? And they've left. Xiaohua nodded. He finally understood the almighty power of cultivators. That's good, that's good. Fan Riguan extended his hand to wipe away the non-existent sweat on his forehead. He said in shame, When I was talking to Daoist Xiao just now, I was careless and directly called out City Lord Lu's name. Just now, City Lord Lu actually found out. Although he was magnanimous and didn't blame me, I was warned by City Lord Lu's anger in my heart. In the future, I won't dare to be so rude. That's fine. Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. How could Lu Yichuan know that Fan Riguan had mentioned his name? It was only because Fan Riguan was under Lu Yichuan's pressure that a flaw appeared in his mind. He had a guilty conscience. If you don't do anything wrong, you won't be afraid of ghosts knocking on your door. The ancient saying is correct. Xiaohua naturally thought of his low-grade talisman pen. All right, City Lord Lu has already forgiven you. You don't have to blame yourself. Let's see if this is Jingfan Qi? Xiaohua smiled and pointed forward. So fast? Fan Riguan was stunned. He raised his head and looked. Unconsciously, his face was filled with joy. Daoist Xiao, you know that this is Jing Fan Qi. Xiao Hua listened and didn't say anything. He folded his hands and looked at the gradually approaching lake. Jing Fan Qi's lake was extremely large. The shore couldn't be seen with a single glance. However, apart from Xiao Hua's shuttle, no other shuttle was approaching. It was obvious that this was a rare sight. Daoist Xiao, this is the place where mortals like me live. In the past, only when Jingbua City came to select disciples, the immortals would come here. Yesterday in Immortal. I didn't know that they came directly to Jing Fan Qi. It was only because of my earnest request that they sent me back. Fan Riguan explained as the shuttle reached the shore. Looking at the empty lake shore, he explained. And Xiaohua nodded. Seeing the shuttle's light screen descend, he jumped out of the shuttle. His figure was very agile. Xiaohua was in midair. He couldn't help but feel a little worried. Just now, when the shuttle hit the huge wave, he didn't use any magic power. Even under that kind of situation, he was still able to nimbly swim in midair. He even caught Fan Riguan with great ease. That feeling, it was as if he had another kind of divine ability. Oh, it was as if he had another kind of ability. He didn't think about it before. Now that he thought about it, it was really a little mysterious. AI, there are still a lot of things that can be discovered from me. After Xiaohua landed on the ground, he shook his head slightly. When he turned his head back, Fan Riguan also jumped down from the shuttle. In a hurry, the surface of the lake below the shuttle was the same as when the shuttle appeared. Countless bubbles gushed out, and then a light blue brilliance appeared, and the shuttle disappeared. Casually glancing at the similar pillar beside him, Xiaohua smiled and said, "Ah Zhen, this is your home. You should act as the host." Of course. Daoist Xiao, please follow me." Fan Riguan smiled. Looking at the familiar building in front of him, his eyes showed a trace of warmth. He quickly stepped forward and led Xiaohua inside. There was still some distance between the buildings on the shore, and this empty space didn't have any traces of people. The two walked quickly for a moment, and approached the buildings. Reflecting the setting sun in the west, Xiaohua squinted his eyes. He very keenly saw that several zhang ahead, there was a thin light screen that separated the sunlight into 7 colors. Suddenly, Xiaohua came to a realization. He recalled that when he fainted on Xihua Peak, some things had happened in the space behind his head. Bone refining 7 colors, could it be related to the 7 colors in this light? Daoist Xiao, in front of us is Jing Fanqi's immortal formation. Without the immortal residence issued by Jingbua City, no mortal can pass through. Fan Riguan, who was walking in front of Xiaohua, stopped and turned back. However, for an immortal elder like Daoist Xiao, this immortal formation is ineffective. Please rest assured. Oh? Is that so? Xiaohua discovered that as long as it was an array formation in Jingbua City, there would always be some Jingbua City disciples hidden. Therefore, he wouldn't easily reveal that he had seen the array formation. Then, your yellow talisman, did you get it from the Flying Fish Inn? Daoist Xiao, you can't get the immortal talisman from Flying Fish Inn to enter Jing Fanqi. I got it from Jingbua City near Flying Fish Inn. Oh, I see. Xiaohua nodded. With quick steps, the two arrived in front of the formation. Fan Riguan didn't stop. He didn't take out any yellow talisman, and was about to pass through the formation. Xiaohua was about to stop him when he saw a burst of light flowing on the light screen. An old man of about 40 years old appeared on the light screen. That old man was wearing the disciple's uniform of Jingbua City. His divine sense swept over Xiaohua's body. Then, he said with some surprise, "Fellow Taoist, why did you come to Jing Fanqi of Jingbua City?" Before Xiaohua could say anything, Fan Riguan, who had already passed through the light screen, immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, old immortal. I invited Daoist Xiao to treat my wife and daughter." "Shut up! Who asked you to speak?" The old man shouted angrily like a clap of thunder. Fan Riguan was shocked. His knees went soft, and he knelt on the ground. That old man's cultivation was at the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm. His angry shout also gave Xiaohua a fright. Xiaohua also hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior Xiaohua greets Senior. You have the ability to treat illnesses?" The old man's voice was full of contempt. "Old Immortal." Fan Riguan was about to speak again, but how could Xiaohua allow him to speak? He hurriedly interjected. "Senior, this one should still go and take a look. Whether or not it can be cured, it's still up to fate." -5. Chapter 13:13. "Humph, you're just a junior in the second layer of qi refining. How can you be so powerful?" the old man said coldly. Xiaohua smiled and said, "Junior heard from Fan Riguan that as long as one is a cultivator, one can enter Jingfan Qi. Although Junior is only in the second layer of qi refining and my cultivation is shallow, I can still be considered to have stepped into the door of cultivation. Could it be that Junior can't enter? Humph, my Jingbua city naturally has this kind of rule. However, since I am guarding this area, of course I have to make decisions for the people of my Jingbua city. I can't let anyone who is harmful to my people enter." The old man's tone was a little angry. "What harmful person? It's just that this young master's cultivation is shallow." Xiaohua's heart was like a mirror. He chuckled and cupped his hands and said, "Junior is from a medical family. Since young, I have been identifying medicinal herbs with this grandfather and learning medical skills. It's also because of this background that I was chosen by the sect and accepted into the sect. However, because Junior is too immersed in this, my cultivation has been slow to improve. I've let Senior see a joke." Alas, Xiaohua's lies at this time, one after another. He didn't even need to think about it in his heart, he just blurted it out directly. "So it's like this." The old man muttered to himself, and stared at Xiaohua for a long time. Xiaohua was not timid. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the old man's distorted figure very calmly. "Go," the old man waved his hand. His figure gradually rose and disappeared. "Taoist Master Xiao." Fan Riguan had been a waiter for many years. Just now, when he saw Xiaohua stop him from saying that he had already cured his mother, he felt that there was something wrong. He said somewhat embarrassedly, "Did I cause trouble for Senior Immortal?" "Oh, it's like this." When Xiaohua heard Fan Riguan mention it, he sighed and said, "Although I'm the immortal elder you speak of, my actual cultivation is still not enough. Therefore, the matter of curing your mother's illness, and the matter of your wife and daughter, you must not tell anyone else. You have to know that this is not a good reputation for I, but a disaster for I." "Yes, I know. Before I came here, my mother had told me not to reveal anything. Xiao Qian in the inn, the waiter like me asked, and I told him that you had nothing to do with my mother's illness." Fan Riguan said hurriedly. "It's just that just now I was panicking, so I almost said it." Xiaohua understood Fan Riguan's urgency. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to enter Jingfan Qi's territory, so he waved his hand and said, "It's fine. I'm not from Jingbua City anyway. You can wait for 5 to 6 years. It won't be too late for you to wait until I leave." "No, I swear that I will never say it again," Fan Riguan said resolutely. Hee, that's good." Xiaohua understood in his heart that cultivators had countless ways to make him talk, but the problem was, who would be so bored? "Oh right, this Madame Fan Riguan's mother, what kind of person is she?" "Unexpectedly. Her mind is so meticulous. She seems to have some understanding of the world of cultivators," Xiaohua thought. However, Jingbua City is a place of cultivators. Jingbua City often chooses disciples from Jingfan Qi, so it's normal for her to know the cruelty of cultivators. "Let's go, your family must be waiting anxiously." Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "Yes, please follow me, Taoist Xiao." Fan Riguan's face was filled with gratitude as he bowed and asked Xiaohua to follow him. After walking for a while with Fan Riguan, the two figures gradually disappeared into a cluster of buildings. As Xiaohua gradually went deeper, he also looked at the surroundings with interest. This was a place that looked like a town. The streets were very small, completely different from the streets in other parts of Jinghua City. On both sides of the street were houses and shops, which was not much different from what Xiaohua had imagined. Moreover, there were more and more people in the surroundings. They all looked like ordinary people, and there were different kinds of people. This was a secular town. Although Xiaohua was wearing an ordinary Taoist robe and there was nothing special about it among cultivators, in this secular town, it was out of place. In addition, he was very tall, so when he walked in the crowd, he stood out like a crane among chickens. Everyone could see him early on, especially that big bald head. The attitude of the crowd made Xiaohua feel a little strange. When these people saw him, they were all very respectful. Many of them also stopped and cupped their hands to salute him. Xiaohua also smiled and saluted at first, but later on, there were too many people. He really couldn't cope with them, so he could only smile and nod. Fortunately, these people's eyes were full of reverence. After saluting him, they all left. They didn't crowd around him like stars surrounding the moon. Presumably, Jing Fenqi also had no lack of cultivators coming here. Taoist Xiao, please come this way. Fan Riguan walked in front of Xiaohua. His face was very proud. When they reached a not too small street, he turned his head and said with a smile, "Yes." Xiaohua nodded. He was also very happy in his heart. This kind of respect made him feel quite emotional. Ever since he started cultivating, he was always looked down upon by others. When had he ever received this kind of treatment? The street wasn't too deep. Some men and women walked out. When they saw Fan Riguan, they all greeted him warmly. When they saw Xiaohua, they were even more surprised. They respectfully stood at the side and asked Xiaohua to go first. When they reached the end of the street, there was a not too big courtyard. Fan Riguan quickly walked a few steps and shouted, "Mother, mother, this boy has invited Taoist Xiao here." The door of the courtyard was opened with a hoo-la sound. A middle-aged woman's face popped out from inside. Her face was full of disbelief, but when she saw Xiaohua behind Fan Riguan, her expression immediately changed to surprise. She quickly opened the door and shouted, "Taoist Xiao, please come in. Taoist Xiao, please come in. I'll help my mother out." As she said that, she looked like she was crying tears of joy. She turned around and ran away with nimble steps. This little one's mother has been ill for many years. Yesterday, she took Taoist Xiao's elixir and can move freely. However, this little one still doesn't dare to let her move too much. Fan Riguan said very apologetically. Therefore, I can't wait at the door for too long. I have to personally welcome Taoist Xiao. It's fine. Your wife's mother is an elder. How can I let her wait at the door? Xiaohua said indifferently. When Fan Riguan heard this, he immediately had a flattered expression. He really didn't expect that a high and mighty cultivator would be so amiable and approachable. He even treated his mother as an elder. "Please, Taoist Xiao, please go first." Fan Riguan invited Xiaohua in with tears of gratitude. "Father!" A clear and melodious voice sounded. Before Xiaohua could take a step, the voice came from the courtyard. Xiaohua stopped with a smile on his face. Soon after, a 4 or 5-year-old little girl dressed in red and green with a little braid on her head ran out from the courtyard. When she saw Fan Riguan, she called out sweetly and opened her arms to ask for a hug. "Sheer, don't make trouble!" Fan Riguan's face was a little uneasy. He scolded, "Quickly come and greet Taoist Xiao!" When the little girl heard her father's scolding, she stopped. Her small mouth twitched and her round eyes rolled around. She looked at Xiaohua from head to toe. Her eyes were full of surprise. Her small mouth opened, but she didn't say anything. She trotted a few steps and walked to Fan Riguan's side. She stretched her body and put her hand to her mouth, as if she wanted to whisper something to Fan Riguan. "Taoist Xiao, this is a dog girl. Her name is Zhu Xier. She doesn't know much. Sorry for making you laugh." Fan Riguan hurriedly explained to Xiaohua. Seeing Zhu Xier so naive, how could Xiaohua blame her? He just smiled and nodded. Xier, if you have something to say, just say it. Xiaohua asked. Zhu Xier looked at Xiaohua and then looked at Fan Riguan. She said clearly, People say that Taoist Xiao is a white-bearded grandfather, but why don't you have a beard? Not only do you not have a beard, you don't even have hair. This? Xiaohua didn't expect Zhu Xier to ask about his hair. He was a little embarrassed. He then touched his bald head and said with a smile, That's because I am smarter than the average Taoist Xiao. Ah? Why? Zhu Xier didn't understand. She suddenly blinked her two big eyes. It was very strange. Because a smart head doesn't grow hair, Xiaohua said with a smile. Ah? So it's like that. Zhu Xier obviously didn't hear this sentence. She turned her head and looked at Fan Riguan. At this time, Fan Riguan couldn't help but laugh. He wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. If he didn't laugh, he would panic. You're lying. Even Taoist Xiao doesn't lie. Zhu Xier was very smart. She immediately saw through it and said with a pout, Xier, don't be rude. An old voice came from the other side of the door. It was an urgent voice. An old woman with a head full of white hair walked out with the help of the middle-aged woman from before. She was trembling slightly. Grandma! Zhu Xier shouted with grievance and ran to the old woman. Grandma? A very intimate, yet unfamiliar address flashed through Xiaohua's mind like a bolt of lightning. A fuzzy, kind face faintly flashed in Xiaohua's mind. Xiaohua had never thought that the address, grandmother, would have such a great effect on him. This is my grandma? The face in his mind was a little fuzzy and not clear. Xiaohua couldn't see it clearly no matter how hard he tried. The old woman ignored Zhu Xier and stepped forward. She trembled and was about to kneel down and salute. Zhu Xier greets Taoist Xiao. Thank you, Taoist Xiao, for saving my life. Xiaohua was originally in a daze. He only woke up when he heard the voice. Seeing the old woman about to kneel down, he couldn't help but be shocked. He quickly supported her and said, I don't dare. Grandma is much older than I. How can you salute I? Moreover, I didn't mean to save you. I don't dare to accept such a big salute. Taoist Xiao, you are a Taoist Xiao. You can't talk about age with us mortals. Moreover, whether you did it on purpose or not, it is a fact that Taoist Xiao saved me. If I don't personally thank you, I won't feel at ease. Looking at the old woman with white hair, wrinkles all over her face, and the sincere expression in her eyes, Xiaohua thought for a moment and sighed. He loosened his hand and said, If you want to thank me, it's better to go to the courtyard first. The old woman came to her senses and hurriedly said, Immortal Elder is right, please. -5. Chapter 13-14. Xiaohua didn't stand on ceremony and walked into the courtyard first. The courtyard wasn't big, but it was very neat and tidy. In the middle of the courtyard, there was a flourishing parasol tree full of vitality. Behind the parasol tree was a central room with an open door. Next to the central room were several small rooms with their doors closed. Just by looking at the things in the courtyard, Xiaohua could see that Fan Riguan's family was well off. Taoist Xiao, please accept a bow from this old woman and her family. Without waiting for Xiaohua to understand his surroundings, the aged voice of the Zhu clan's old woman rang out behind him. When Xiaohua turned around, not only the Zhu clan's old woman, but also Fan Riguan's family of 3 were kneeling on the ground. Xiaohua leaned to one side. He really didn't want such an old woman to bow to him. Then, he hurried forward and single-handedly helped the old woman up. The old woman stood up under Xiaohua's unparalleled strength, and the middle-aged woman behind her also hurried forward to support her. The old woman let out a sigh of relief and said with a smile, Taoist Xiao, although this old woman is a layman, but I never wanted to take advantage of other people's kindness. He asked for an immortal pill in the inn. I didn't like that at all, but this is a junior's filial piety. This old woman can't stop him. Then, she lovingly looked at Fan Riguan and sincerely said to Xiaohua, Zhen must have already told me a bit about what happened in the past. I won't hide it from Taoist Xiao. In this old woman's eyes, cultivators are the most stingy. For a little bit of benefit, they can draw their swords and even fight with their lives. Therefore, this old woman has never given them any extravagant hope. However, yesterday, Zhen actually brought back an immortal pill and cured this old woman's chronic illness. This is really beyond my expectations. Taoist Zhao's noble character and unquestionable integrity, your magnanimity really made this old woman change her previous impression of cultivators. Alas, old woman's words also make I blush with shame. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Cultivators go against the will of the heavens. Everyone is trying to seize the first opportunity of the heavenly Tao. If someone is lenient, they will have to pay tens or hundreds of years of hard work. What's more, it could even be their life. No cultivator will lower their guard. Perhaps this is what Senior doesn't understand. When the old woman heard this, she smiled even more. Taoist Master Xiao, you're not that old, right? Xiao Hua's face reddened slightly. I am already 20 years old, but my cultivation is still shallow. Just based on Taoist Zhao's generosity in giving me an immortal pill, even if my cultivation is low now, I'm sure I'll be able to reach the great Tao in the future. Old Shu praised. Thank you for your kind words. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and took out 2 top-grade parasol pills from his storage pouch. He handed them over and said, Although I don't know why this pill can cure Elder's chronic illness, but since Zhen's wife and daughter also need this pill, and I have received their thanks, Elder, please accept these 2 pills. The old woman looked at the sycamore pill in Xiao Hua's hand, her eyes filled with joy. Her lips trembled slightly as she stretched out her hand, seemingly hesitating. Elder, there's no harm in accepting it. To I, the significance of this pill is far greater than its medicinal effect. Since it can save 2 lives, I am still willing to take it out. Xiao Hua handed over the pills to the old woman. AI Taoist Master Xiao is so righteous, this old woman really admires you. This matter concerns my Zhu family's descendants. This old woman doesn't dare to be unreasonable. Thank you, Taoist Master Xiao. The old woman sighed and held the parasol pill in her hand trembling. Xiao Hua sighed in his heart, but at the same time, he also felt a burst of comfort in his heart. It was the kind of comfort of accumulating merit. Zhen, since Taoist Master Xiao is giving the pill, you take Xiao Feng and Xier and let them take the pill first. This old woman will accompany Taoist Master Xiao here. The old woman raised her hand and handed the parasol pill to Fan Riguan. Mother, it's already late. Taoist Master Xiao wants to stay in our house. The place hasn't been cleaned yet. How can you take the pill in such a hurry? Moreover, there's still 20 to 30 years before the disease flares up. There's no need to rush. Fan Riguan was somewhat embarrassed. That's right, Taoist Master Xiao, please don't blame me. This stubborn disease has been troubling my Zhu family for who knows how many generations. This old woman suddenly found a way and lost her sense of propriety. The old woman said apologetically, then waved her hand and said, Thomer, quickly take out the immortal fruits in the house and let Taoist Master Xiao taste them. Yes, mother. The middle-aged woman hurriedly responded and went to the central room. Fan Riguan said in a low voice, Mother, aren't you going to invite Taoist Master Xiao into the house? Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Let's do it under this parasol tree. I feel a little familiar here. All right, Zhen, quickly bring out the table and chairs. Not long after, a square table and 2 chairs were moved under the parasol tree. A plate of strange fruits was also placed on the table. Taoist Master Xiao, this is a special product of my Jingfen Qi. The immortals of Jinghua City often come to pick it. This old woman specially asked Fomer to buy some for Taoist Master Xiao to taste. Thank you for your kindness. Xiao Hua smiled and picked up a jujube-like spirit fruit and threw it into his mouth. The spirit fruit didn't have any spirit energy, but it tasted very good and was extremely refreshing. After casually eating 2, Xiao Hua saw Zhu Xir drooling and licking her lips. He smiled and pushed the rest to the side of the table and said, Little guy, I will treat you to some spirit fruits. Immortal Elder is so unreasonable. This is what Grandma bought with the immortal stones at home to treat you to. It is originally my family's food. How can you treat me to it? Zhu Xie saw that Xiaohua was like a big brother next to her, far from the seriousness of an immortal elder, so she was a little scared. Xie, shut up! The old woman scolded and then smiled apologetically. Could it be that Taoist Master Xiao doesn't like these immortal fruits? This old woman will send Ah Zhen to buy some more. Ha, no need, old woman, these spirit fruits I like very much, but I will just eat a little, no need to trouble you any more. Xiaohua quickly waved his hand and said, It's better to let Ah Zhen's wife and Xie take the elixir earlier, so that you can be at ease. After pondering for a moment, the old woman said, All right, let them go in and take the elixir. This old woman will accompany the immortal elder to explain the whole story. And that's how it should be. Xiaohua clapped his hands and said. Then, Xiaohua's heart moved, and a strange idea appeared in his mind. He stretched out his hand and said, Xie, come here, let I see what's wrong with you. You have. Zhu Xie's little face was red, but she didn't say the last word. Xie, go, listen to Taoist Master Xiao. The old woman scolded. Zhu Xie felt very wrong, but she didn't dare to refute. She slowly moved over. Xiaohua smiled and handed a slender spirit fruit to her, and said with a smile, You can eat this spirit fruit, just stretch out your right hand. Zhu Xie was only a 5-year-old child. She took the spirit fruit in one hand and threw away her unhappiness. She happily stretched out her lotus root-like right arm. Xiaohua smiled and stretched out his right hand's index finger and middle finger, and put it on Zhu Xie's wrist where her pulse was. He closed his eyes as if he was thinking. The old woman stared at Xiaohua's face, paying attention to the changes in his expression. Sure enough, Xiaohua's face was as heavy as water, then slightly frowned, and after half a cup of tea, it became gloomy again. Seeing this, the old woman was not surprised, but happy, and her eyes lit up. When Xiaohua took his hand away from Zhu Xie's arm, the old woman asked, Taoist Master Xiao, did you notice anything? Please stretch out your right arm, Xiaohua said with a smile. The old woman did as she was told, and Xiaohua did the same as before, but his expression was the opposite. He didn't frown. And okay, Ah Zhen, you take your wife and your daughter to the room to take the elixir. Xiaohua withdrew his hand and said, If the elixir works, this Zhu family's chronic illness can be cured. Fan Riguan's face was full of surprise, and he cupped his hands and said, Then, I was rude. Go, the earlier you take the elixir, the earlier you can feel at ease. Xiaohua didn't mind, and Zhu Feng, who was standing behind Fan Riguan, also bowed and followed Fan Riguan into the room with Zhu Xie. Taoist Master Xiao, please bring in some more spirit fruit and listen to this old woman. The old woman pushed the spirit fruit over again, and said with a smile, I wonder if Taoist Master Xiao knows about talismans? Talismans? Xiaohua frowned, shook his head and said, I's cultivation is shallow. I don't know about talismans. It's not that Taoist Master Zhao's cultivation is shallow. This talisman has been lost in the Xiaoyu continent for a long time. If it wasn't for my Zhu family suffering from this insidious talisman, how could this old woman know? Old woman. Xiaohua listened to the old woman of the Zhu family talk, and it was simply more than what he knew. He couldn't help but feel deep veneration. The old woman of the Zhu family seemed to know what Xiaohua was thinking. She took out a very thick book from her bosom, handed it over, and said with a smile, This is my Zhu family's most precious heirloom. It records the deeds of my Zhu family's ancestors, some matters of the Xiaoyu continent, the misfortune of my Zhu family suffering from the talisman, and some of my many years of experience in breaking the talisman. Xiaohua took it, and casually flipped through it. This was a book made of silk of an unknown material, and there were a lot of small words written inside. Xiaohua didn't look at it carefully, and handed it over again, and said with a smile, Since it's the Zhu family's heirloom, I won't look at it any more. Taoist Master Xiao is really a gentleman. The old woman smiled, but didn't take it, and continued. This isn't the most important thing. The most important thing about this book is that it was left behind by the ancestors of the Zhou family. My Zhou family was also a cultivator of the Xiaoyu continent several thousand years ago. This book hides a great secret. A great secret? Xiaohua stared blankly, and again looked at the unremarkable book in his hand. This secret is related to cultivation. My Zhou family has long stopped being cultivators, so it's useless to take this book. Since Taoists shall help my Zhou family get rid of the pain of the talisman, this book is my gift of thanks. I hope that Taoists shall will be able to comprehend the secret in this book soon, and achieve a great divine ability. Ah? So it's like this. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. It wasn't that he didn't think about the Zhou family's reward, but he definitely didn't think that they would give him a book. This book had been in the Zhou family's possession for several thousand years, and no one had been able to comprehend the great secret. He didn't think that he would have more luck than others. Compared to this unattainable great secret, he would rather get a simple third-layer qi refining technique. -5. Chapter 13-15. Sitting under the parasol tree and looking at the thin twilight, Xiaohua frowned slightly as he listened to the old woman of the Zhou clan slowly talk about the Zhou clan's matters. It turns out that this Zhou clan existed several thousand years ago. And perhaps even longer. Anyway, the old woman of the Zhou clan wasn't too clear. At that time, the Zhou clan was also a famous cultivation clan on the Xiaoyu continent. But now, they only had a single descendant. Moreover, this descendant was only barely passed down. The fundamental reason for this was a charm that Xiaohua had never heard of before. The so-called talisman curse was not the same as the Chinese talisman curse. It was a kind of great magical power. It was cast by a person with great magical power to cast a spell that was similar to a curse on a person. This spell would take root in the person's body and cause a huge impact on the person's body and meridians, thus affecting the person's life. However, this was not the scariest thing about the talisman curse. The scariest thing about the talisman curse was that it could be passed down from generation to generation. Before the talisman curse was broken, all of the person's children and grandchildren would have this talisman curse in their bodies. And this kind of charm is also used on the person's children and grandchildren. The charm is a divine ability that Xiaohua has never heard of. Although the old woman of the Zhou clan was deeply harmed by it, she also can't explain it clearly. As for what kind of cultivation clan the Zhou clan used to be, how it flourished, how it declined, why a person with great divine ability cast the charm on it, and what this charm is specifically, the old woman of the Zhou clan isn't very clear. Perhaps it's because the truth has been annihilated in history, or perhaps it's because the Zhou clan's ancestors intentionally covered it up. Everything has become a story after several thousand years. Taoist Master Xiao, this charm is very insidious. My Zhou clan's descendants, regardless of whether they're male or female, will be implanted with this charm. This charm will only appear between the age of 40 and 50. First, a part of the body will feel pain, then this pain will slowly spread throughout the entire body. Along with the pain, their strength will also gradually decrease. In the end, they will lie on the bed and only have the strength to wail and die from the pain. The old woman of the Zhou clan's eyes showed fear. This old woman once saw father wail in pain for several days with my own eyes. In the end, he had no choice but to take poison and commit suicide. Alas, this old woman's father said that taking poison and committing suicide is the fate of my Zhou clan. This old woman has also prepared this item for herself. Alas, in order to continue the bloodline of the Zhou clan, if our Zhou clan has a male descendant, we naturally don't have to worry about it. If we have a female descendant, we will have to recruit a son-in-law. After marrying into the family, both the male and female descendants will have to take the Zhou clan's surname. Zhen is the son-in-law that my daughter, Feng'er, found when she was young. I originally didn't want to tell him about this, but Zhen is very filial. When the curse on my body activated, he became very anxious and did everything he could to find a doctor to cure me. He even used his job at the inn to ask the Immortals for pills. Actually, I already knew that if the Immortal Elders could break the curse with their immortal pills, they would have broken it thousands of years ago. Why would they wait until now? Last night, when he brought back Taoist Zhao's immortal pills, the old woman didn't believe it. However, even if she didn't have the slightest confidence, she still wouldn't take it herself. After all, if Chi'er took it, she wouldn't have to suffer from the curse anymore. Alas, although Chi'er didn't know about the curse, she was born filial. Unexpectedly, she wanted to give it to her mother. How could Feng'er have the heart to let the old woman take the poison and die? She even wanted to give it to the old woman. It was really difficult. This is because the heavens have the virtue of cherishing all living things, and it benefits good people the most. If it weren't for the fact that the Zhu clan's people are all filial people, how would they know that this medicinal pill can break the sinister curse? Xiaohua said with a smile. Good people will be rewarded, that's exactly what I meant. Taoist Xiao is right. Don't say that the will of the heavens is unpredictable, justice is in the hearts of people. The old woman also said with a smile. If it weren't for Taoist Zhao's immortal pills, we wouldn't have been able to break the curse for thousands of years. Moreover, Taoist Zhao wouldn't have been able to touch our general if we give up the immortal pills. Our Zhu clan's book wouldn't have been able to find a fated person like Taoist Zhao. Boom! Just when Xiaohua heard the old woman's words, the space in his mind shook violently. A faint trace appeared under the starry sky. As for what it was, he couldn't see it clearly. Xiaohua felt the movement in his space. He immediately put his mind into the space and carefully looked at the trace. After a while, he came out of the space. Taoist Xiao, do you think the old woman's words are correct? The old woman said with a smile. This is the so-called karma, the so-called fate. Taoist Xiao shouldn't refuse this book. Karma? Xiaohua's furrowed brows immediately relaxed. He understood and said with a smile. What the old woman said is right. I shouldn't refuse. As he spoke, he waved his hand and put the book into his storage bag. Seeing Xiaohua put away the book, the old woman smiled. Taoist Xiao, you've given my Zhu clan a new lease on life. My Zhu clan can't repay you and can only give this thing to Taoist Xiao. As for whether or not Taoist Xiao can comprehend this secret, it will depend on Taoist Xiao. I know, Xiaohua said with a smile. If I can comprehend it, then I'll go to the Zhu clan to form good karma. Really? The old woman was shocked. She stood up and saluted. Then this old woman really doesn't know how to thank Taoist Xiao. Alas, who knows when that will happen? I's only speaking with a red mouth and white teeth right now. Taoist Xiao, as long as you have the heart, maybe there really will be such a day. The old woman sat down. Then, she hesitated and asked, I have something to say, but I don't know if it's appropriate. Xiaohua smiled bitterly in his heart and nodded. Please speak. Taoist Xiao, when you pressed your fingers on Chi'er and the old woman's wrists, was that a medical method? That, Xiaohua said. I don't know the origin of that technique, but it seems to be a medical method. I felt something very strange in Chi'er's meridians, but I can't tell what it is. I only felt that it was very cold, but I didn't feel it in the old woman's body. Presumably, it has something to do with the talisman that you talked about. Taoist Xiao, you are indeed a deity. The old woman praised. My Zhu clan's ancestors used countless methods, but there was no record of this in the book. I'm lucky. Xiaohua smiled. Actually, he didn't know what technique he used just now, but he had a sudden realization. At this time, suddenly, a miserable scream came from the central room. Ah! The old woman was shocked and shouted. Feng'er. Xiaohua was also shocked. He immediately stood up. He didn't use any magic power, but he used some kind of mysterious footwork and quickly ran towards the central room like a ghost. Xiaohua rushed into the central room, then he realized. I didn't use any magic power, how can I run so fast? However, everything in front of him didn't allow him to think anymore. He saw that on one side of the central room, behind a screen, There was a big bed. At this time, Fan Riguan's wife and daughter were lying on it. Fan Riguan's wife, Xu Feng, was screaming. Xu Feng was bleeding from her 7 orifices, and her face was pale. Her 2 hands were grabbing the air, and her fingers were pale, as if she was in extreme pain. Mother! At this time, Zhu Xia was also screaming. She was bleeding from her 7 orifices, and her face gradually became distorted. It seemed that she was also in pain. Fan Riguan sat in front of the bed and pressed his wife with his hands. He anxiously shouted, "Feng'er, Feng'er." But Xu Feng's strength was so great that she almost pushed him to the side. At this time, seeing Zhu Xia screaming, Fan Riguan didn't know what to do. "You go and hold Xia." Xiaohua's voice sounded in Fan Riguan's ears. Fan Riguan immediately calmed down, let go of Xu Feng, and rushed to Zhu Xia. Without Fan Riguan holding her down, Xu Feng's body twisted rapidly, as if she was going to jump up. At this time, Xiaohua stretched out his hand and pressed on Xu Feng's shoulder. With a little force, a huge force pressed Xu Feng to the bed. Xu Feng could only struggle with all her strength, but she couldn't leave the bed. Then Xiaohua stretched out his right hand like lightning and held Xu Feng's right hand in his mouth, and pressed 2 fingers on her wrist. When Zhu Shi's old woman walked in, Xiaohua was thinking with his eyes closed. Xu Feng was still struggling on the bed in pain. Zhu Xia was also in pain. Under Fan Riguan's hands, she was also struggling with all her strength. What's going on? Zhu Shi's old woman also panicked. When she took the pill, she didn't feel this pain. Could it be? A trace of ominous feeling rose in the old woman's heart. After all, if he didn't have the confidence to break the charm, it could be fatal. Walking to Xiaohua's side, the old woman didn't dare to make a sound. She held the table beside her and nervously looked at Xiaohua's face. After a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua opened his eyes with a smile on his face and said, "Congratulations, the charm in your daughter's body is gradually decreasing. However, it seems that because the charm was broken, it caused a backlash. The pain caused by the charm was triggered in advance." "Really, thank you, Taoist Xiao." The old woman was almost crying with joy. "Alas, if only there was a soul-cleansing charm, it could reduce your daughter's pain. Unfortunately, I only have a high-grade yellow charm," Xiaohua said regretfully. But at this time, his heart was moved again. He stretched out his hand and urged the magic power in his body. Pa pa pa. He pressed a few acupoints on Xu Feng's body. Xu Feng actually calmed down and stopped struggling. "This is also possible?" Xiaohua was surprised, but he couldn't care less. He got up and pressed a few acupoints on Zhu Xi's body, making her quietly lie down on the bed. "Taoist Xiao." Fan Riguan stood up at this time, sweating profusely, and looked at Xiaohua very anxiously. How could it be easy to break the charm? The charm in your wife and your daughter's body is intact. Breaking it alive will definitely cause pain. Because the charm was triggered long ago, old madam has already experienced pain. It should be relatively easy to break it." Xiaohua thought for a while and said, "Then what about now?" "Taoist Xiao," Zhu Shi's old woman asked. "I cast a spell to restrain the 2 of them. For the time being, they can't struggle. But this pain still has to be experienced. After enduring this period, it should be fine. -5. Chapter 13-16. Sure enough, as Xiaohua said, after 2 meals, the pain on Xu Feng and Zhu Xi's faces gradually lessened until they finally calmed down. The sweat on their foreheads and bodies had already soaked their black hair and clothes. Seeing this, Xiaohua looked at their situation again and turned to Fan Riguan and the old woman. He cupped his hands and said, "Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you." As he spoke, he casually tapped the acupoints on their bodies a few times. Only then could they move their bodies again. "Feng'er Xia!" Fan Riguan and the old woman's faces were filled with joy as they rushed to the bed. Xiaohua looked at them with a smile and walked out of the room. At this time, the curtain of night had already fallen. The clear night sky was dotted with stars. Xiao Hua stood with his hands behind his back under the parasol tree and looked at the boundless starry sky through the leaves of the parasol tree. Countless stars twinkled slightly, like pairs of cunning eyes. Occasionally, meteors streaked across the night sky, disrupting the order of the night sky. Xiao Hua looked while thinking about what just happened. What was that footwork? Although I can't remember, I actually know how to use it. It seems that I'm very familiar with it. What is the technique to tap the acupoints? It actually has the effect of the soul-cleansing talisman? It seems there are many other techniques with different effects. Can it be used on cultivators? Xiao Hua immediately thought of the use of the acupoint tapping technique. But after thinking for a while, he unconsciously shook his head. Cultivators have defensive magic power all over their bodies. Many people also have defensive magic tools. Even if this technique hits the acupoints, what's the use? It can only be effective on people like Zhu Xie. Taoist Xiao. Just as Xiao Hua was thinking, Fan Riguan walked over and bowed. Thank you for coming personally, otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiao Hua smiled and nodded. I received benefits from your Zhu family, naturally I have to do my best. Alas, I only found out yesterday that my mother's family actually had such hardships. It's a pity that I always felt miserable about my background. Compared to now, it really doesn't count as anything. In the future, you should show more filial piety to the elderly. Husband and wife should treat each other with respect, that's all. Xiao Hua said with a smile, as if he was an experienced person. Oh, it's getting late. My wife and my daughter are too tired and have already fallen asleep. I can't thank Junren Xiao. Please come with me. Your room has already been tidied up. Let them come over tomorrow morning to thank you. After saying that, Fan Riguan led Xiao Hua to a room. The room was already very clean, and a plate of spirit fruits was placed on the table. The house is really simple and crude. This place is decorated according to the Flying Fish Inn. I wonder if Taoist Xiao is satisfied with it? Fan Riguan said embarrassedly. It's all right. Go take care of your mother and the others. Xiao Hua waved his hand and walked to the side of the table. There was a praying mat there. Xiao Hua sat cross-legged and picked up a spirit fruit and threw it into his mouth. After Fan Riguan withdrew, Xiao Hua looked around the room. The room wasn't big, but it was tidied up very delicately. It was much cleaner than his room at the Flying Fish Inn. A small piece of Minghua stone was placed on the table, illuminating the entire room. In the corner of the room, there were some uncommon ornaments, looking rather elegant. Xiao Hua looked around. He knew that Fan Riguan had spent a lot of effort. He nodded in his heart. Immediately, he patted his storage pouch and took out the book gifted by the old woman from the Zhu family. This book was the same size as an ordinary book. The cover was the same as the pages of the book. They were both made of an unknown silk material, and the words recorded on the pages were also clearly written with a special ink. Xiao Hua didn't look at the words first. He only roughly skimmed through the book. However, he didn't have much hope. The book had been in the Zhu family for several thousand years, and no one had discovered its secret. It was absolutely impossible for him to see any clues just from the outside. Sure enough, Xiao Hua didn't see any abnormalities. He had no choice but to open the book and carefully read it. But after reading for a while, he frowned. What was written in this book, apart from the description of the Zhu family's bitter history, there were also complaints about some cultivators. These complaints were extremely obscure and unclear. Most of the other words were about how to break the Zhu family's talismans. There were also all kinds of strange methods to break the talismans. Some started from the yellow talismans, some started from the magic arts, and some even started from the medicinal pills. However, when Xiao Hua crudely flipped to the end, all of these methods, without exception, failed. And every failure was a fresh human life. Xiao Hua sighed and closed the book. He didn't have much understanding of this talisman. He had only heard the old woman's narration just now. In addition, he had used some inexplicable method to detect the insidious poison in Zhu Feng and Zhu Xier's bodies. As for the specifics, how could he know? As for why the top-grade Wu Yao pill in his space could break the talisman, Xiaohua was even more confused. He himself didn't sense anything different about the Wu Yao pill. The unknown thing that Xiaohuahong, Zhang Qi Xiao, and the others spoke of. He didn't know where it came from, and what use this unknown thing had. It was even harder to say. Just wait until you step on dog shit in the future. Xiaohua suddenly thought of Zhang Qingxiao's catchphrase. He tossed the book in his hand a few times in the air and put it into the space behind his head. Xiaohua sat cross-legged without moving. After putting the book away, his mind returned to the space. He sensed under the starry sky the faint traces that had appeared because of the old woman's karma. What is this thing? It seems to be a technique? It seems to be a hand? At this moment, Xiaohua's mind seemed to be a point, but it also seemed to be the entire space. However, this space didn't match with the starry sky. The starry sky seemed to be within the space, but it also seemed to have no connection with the starry sky. It was another mysterious place. Xiaohua's mind flashed past the traces that had just appeared. Suddenly, his mind stirred, and a feeling of comprehending a technique suddenly arose. Ah? This thing can be comprehended? Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised. He opened up his mind, wanting to completely cover the traces. Unfortunately, the traces only appeared a moment ago. Xiaohua's mind couldn't sense anything specific. This doesn't seem to work. Xiaohua was rather disappointed. But at this moment, perhaps it was a stroke of luck, or perhaps it was a kind of habit. Xiaohua's mind suddenly looked at the endless starry sky above the space. That slow, unceasing, and incomparably mysterious starry sky trajectory. The traces just now haven't completely appeared, so I can't comprehend them. However, this starry sky has already taken shape and is incomparably clear. Countless stars are moving according to different mysterious trajectories. Can I comprehend this starry sky? Xiaohua thought. Without the slightest hesitation, he enlarged his mind infinitely, and directly welcomed the starry sky above the space. His mind was also mysterious. The starry sky didn't have an end, and his mind also seemed to have no end. He didn't know how much time had passed, and he also didn't know how big the starry sky was. Xiaohua only knew that at a certain moment, his mind really did come into contact with the seemingly ethereal starry sky. An indescribable feeling came from his mind. This feeling was even more subtle than when Xiaohua comprehended a technique, even more subtle. It seemed as if everything in the starry sky was gradually being reflected in his mind, and his mind also gradually fused with the starry sky, a kind of mysterious and wonderful realm. Heaven-reaching realm! Xiaohua was startled. Oh, that's not right. This is heaven-reaching, not heaven-reaching realm. Just as Xiaohua was startled, his mind separated from the starry sky and fell back into the space. What kind of technique is this? Or is it some kind of magical ability? Xiaohua was very surprised, somewhat unable to understand. However, when he opened his eyes, he was once again greatly shocked. Outside the window, it was already dyed white, the sky was already bright. Alas, I only let my mind come into contact with the starry sky and immediately spent so much time. If I really comprehended it, I can't say comprehended it, it should be comprehended it. How much time would it take? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. This comprehension. I don't know what use it has. My magic power has increased again. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and checked his cultivation. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded. How come compared to normal cultivation, it's equivalent to 3 days of bitter cultivation? Could it be that this is a kind of fast cultivation method? Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised. That's right, how could a qi condensation brat like him know about comprehending the heavenly Tao? Even nascent soul stage cultivators could directly use their nascent soul to communicate with heaven and earth. Even severed soul stage cultivators could turn their nascent soul into their own avatar, and use the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as their own food. They couldn't pry into the heavenly Tao. Only during tribulation transcendence, the heavenly Tao contained in the lightning tribulation could give transcending tribulation stage cultivators a trace of enlightenment, and open a tiny door to the heavenly Tao, allowing them to have a clear direction in their cultivation. As for the specific heavenly Tao, the entire world was under the heavenly Tao. Since they could see a trace of the heavenly Tao, it was possible for Mahayana stage cultivators to comprehend the heavenly Tao under the heavenly Tao, and use the heavenly Tao to open a door to ascension. Ascension to the immortal world. As for what the heavenly Tao was, every Mahayana stage cultivator's knowledge and comprehension was different. What they needed to do was to use the superficial understanding of the heavenly Tao to ascend. As for the specific comprehension of the heavenly Tao, there were no cultivation methods recorded, or perhaps it could be said that the heavenly Tao was the domain of Immortal's cultivation. The difference between his cultivation and Xiaohua's was not just a little bit. How could Xiaohua understand it? As for why there were heavenly Tao laws in Xiaohua's space, Xiaohua, with his identity as a second-level Qi condensation stage cultivator, actually had the opportunity to use his own mind to comprehend the heavenly Tao. That was not something that could be explained clearly now. What Xiaohua knew was that he could use 1 day as 3 days for this kind of cultivation method. Just this reason alone was enough. -5. Chapter 13-17. Xiaohua didn't know that comprehending the Tao of Heaven was a supreme cultivation method. He only thought that it was a shortcut to speed up his cultivation and let him use 1 day as 3 days. He was in a very good mood. Previously, he thought that if others cultivated for 1 year, he would need to cultivate for 12 years. Now, he should be able to reduce it to 4 years. Alas, if others cultivated for 1 year, it would be equivalent to 4 years of your cultivation. If it was an ordinary person, they would have already been dispirited. But for Xiaohua, it was a kind of surprise. It was like seeing a ray of light in the dark night. Happily, Xiaohua got up from the ground, stretched his body, and walked towards the door. Not waiting for him to open the door, he heard a clear and melodious voice outside. "Niangqin, this? Little Immortal, when will he get up? Why did he wake up later than Xier? What a lazy bug! Shut up!" Fan Riguan's voice was also low, as if he was trying to lower his voice. "Xier, quiet, don't disturb Master Zhao's cultivation. Immortal doesn't sleep." "Humph, obviously he's lazing in bed," Zhu Xier still emphasized. It seemed that Xiaohua didn't change her impression of him because he broke the spell on her body yesterday, and changed her fate. Xiaohua smiled and pushed the door open. His strong eyes shone directly on his face. Of course, it was already close to noon. No wonder Zhu Xier complained. Seeing Xiaohua come out of the room, Zhu's old woman trembled and stepped forward. With the help of Zhu Feng, she bowed and greeted. "Immortal Xiao, good morning!" Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked at the sun. He smiled bitterly and returned the greeting. "It seems that it's already late." "Yes, mother and grandmother were here early in the morning," Zhu Xier said first. "Xier!" Zhu's old woman was angry and scolded. "Who asked you to talk? It's also strange. Usually, a 4 or 5-year-old child would hold their mother's hand and hide behind her mother to look at strangers. But this Zhu Xier is very precocious. Since she saw Xiaohua yesterday, she has been acting like a 10-year-old child." Xiaohua shook his head slightly and said to Xu Feng, "Sister-in-law, after the pain last night, how do you feel today?" Xu Feng's face was full of panic. She supported her mother and said anxiously, "Immortal Xiao, please don't call me like that. Just calling her Madame Zhu is enough." Xiaohua smiles but doesn't say anything. Xu Feng thinks for a while, then says somewhat embarrassedly, "I'll let Taoist Xiao know. Last night, after taking Taoist Zhao's immortal pill, I felt extremely comfortable at first. Then, my whole body was in pain and I couldn't keep my mind clear. Later on, I don't remember anything. When I entered the city, I heard from Chier's father that it was Spiritual Master Xiao who helped us last night. Once again, I would like to thank Spiritual Master Xiao for his kindness. With that, Zhu Feng let go of her mother's arm and pulled Zhu Xier to kneel again. Xiao Hua hurriedly supported her and said, "It's just a small matter, you don't have to do this." After that, Xiao Hua still put his fingers on Zhu Feng and Zhu Xier's wrists. After looking at them for a while, he said to Fan Riguan, "From what I see, your wife and daughter are in the same situation as old madam. As for whether the so-called spell has been broken, I don't know." Fan Riguan glanced at his mother and said to Xiao Hua with a smile, "Mother has already discussed with this little one. Spiritual Master Zhao's immortal pill should be the most effective in breaking the spell in the Zhu family for thousands of years. It's not much different from what the ancestors of the Zhu family guessed. If there is no accident, this insidious spell should have been broken. As for whether it has really been broken or not, only when my wife reaches 50 years old will we know. No matter what, Spiritual Master Xiao is the great benefactor of my Zhu family. My Zhu family will definitely make a longevity tablet for Spiritual Master Xiao and worship him sooner or later." The old woman of the Zhu family says very gratefully. Xiao Hua doesn't know what a longevity tablet is and only thinks that she is being polite. He smiles and waves his hand. Elder has already given I a reward. There's no need to do this kind of thing. Soon after, Xiao Hua asked for the exact time and bade farewell to the old woman and her family. Under Fan Riguan's lead, they left the town and returned to the lakeside. Just as Fan Riguan had said, they arrived at the lakeside and before the great formation that blocked the secular world. Fan Riguan carefully took out a crude yellow talisman from his bosom and stuck it on the surface. The yellow talisman immediately began to burn. However, the light screen did not change at all because the yellow talisman had turned to ash. Just as Xiao Hua was frowning, a figure rushed along the light screen and stopped at the place where the yellow talisman was burning. This person was rather young. He looked at Fan Riguan and asked, "Is this your immortal talisman?" "Yes, it is this little one. This little one is the waiter of the Flying Fish Inn. I'm returning to the Flying Fish Inn today," Fan Riguan says very respectfully with a salute. The young man waves his hand and the light screen dimmed. He says, "Go on." After Fan Riguan passes, the young man doesn't seem to care about Xiao Hua. His figure flashes and disappears. When Xiao Hua saw that the other party was ignoring him, he didn't even need to use the words he had prepared. He shrugged slightly and walked through the light shield. The light shield was also strange. When Xiao Hua walked through it, it actually stirred up the Fa Li in Xiao Hua's body. When the light shield sensed the Fa Li, it immediately stopped moving. Just like when he came, Xiao Hua used a mid-grade spirit stone to start the shuttle again. However, when he returns this time, it is very calm and didn't encounter any storms. After getting off the shuttle, Fan Riguan still wants to invite Xiao Hua to the Flying Fish Inn, but Xiao Hua shakes his head and says, "Zhen I's cultivation is shallow. You probably don't know. The matter of the pills is what I told you before. Don't say a word more. Otherwise, not only you, even I will be killed. If you think about your wife and daughter, you should know what to do. Don't worry, Taoist Xiao. This little one's mother has already warned me countless times. This little one naturally knows what to do," Fan Riguan says respectfully. "That's good. I am a loose cultivator. Others can't find I's trace. You should take care of your own safety." Xiao Hua smiles and turns around to leave. Plop! Fan Riguan kneels on the ground and yells, "Taoist Xiao! Although this little one is immortal of the secular world, I also know how to be grateful. Taoist Xiao's grace to this little one's family, this little one will never forget. I only hate this little one's weak strength. I hope that in the future, this little one will have the opportunity to repay Taoist Xiao's kindness. We'll meet again if fate wills it." Xiao Hua lets out a long laugh and walks away. His shadow is extremely long under the sunlight. Fan Rigwan kneels on the ground, his eyes are filled with gratitude and reverence. Xiaohua has a smile on his face. He doesn't turn his head and doesn't distinguish the direction. He just casually walks forward. Although Fan Rigwan's family is the descendant of a cultivator family, they have already declined. It's already not easy for them to live the life of an ordinary person. Xiaohua absolutely doesn't think that they can repay him in any way. Of course, Xiaohua doesn't have too much time to think about this so-called scroll that contains a great secret. Because right now, he has to face the problem of how to be a good loose cultivator, how to be a qualified loose cultivator, how to survive in this world of cultivators. Of course, he still enjoys the gratitude of Fan Rigwan's family. He likes the feeling of being thanked. After the time it takes to smoke a cigarette, Xiaohua casually finds an inn on the side of the road. It can be considered as another place to stay. This inn's facade is quite big. It's obviously higher class than the Flying Fish Inn. Of course, the inn's price is also not cheap. It costs 20 low-grade spirit stones per night. Naturally, Xiaohua doesn't agree. After bargaining for a while, Xiaohua spares them 3 spirit stones. Xiaohua takes out 17 low-grade spirit stones and gets a room. Similarly, a waiter escorted Xiaohua to his room before respectfully withdrawing. Needless to say, the room is quite big. Xiaohua even feels that the spiritual qi of heaven and earth here is a bit more than the Flying Fish Inn. After he activates the restriction of the room, he sits down cross-legged. He touches his ear and takes out the 100 high-grade talisman papers that the refining charm school gave him. He takes a closer look. Sure enough, the talisman papers are very different from the low-grade talisman papers from before. Not only does it feel to the touch, but the fine runes on the talisman papers are smooth and natural. Because Xiaohua's talisman ink has been used up, if he wants to refine yellow talismans, he will have to buy them from outside. Therefore, Xiaohua thinks for a while and puts the talisman papers into the space. He sits down cross-legged with his palms facing the sky. On one hand, he silently circulates the Death Flower Heart Sutra. On the other hand, he immerses his mind into the space. Just like last night at Jingfanqi, his mind is infinitely enlarged. Time slowly passed, and when night fell, the reverse light within Xiaohua's mind space still stopped. A mysterious fluctuation spread out in all directions with Xiaohua's body as the center. Moreover, because Xiaohua's mind was comprehending the heavenly Tao, this fluctuation contained a trace of the heavenly Tao's aura. In that endless night sky, there were many different kinds of starlight shining down, wrapping around Xiaohua. Even more starlight seeped into Xiaohua's skin, meridians, and bones. Xiaohua spends the whole night cultivating. He only gets up when the sun is high up in the sky. He checks his body with great satisfaction, takes off the yellow talisman, and walks out of the room. He asks the waiter about the location of E.G. and then walks out of the inn. The location of E.G. is a bit off. It is located in the innermost part of the southwest corner of Jingbo City. Xiaohua walks for about an hour before he arrives. However, the road is very direct. Xiaohua is not worried that he can't find the way back to the inn. When Xiaohua leaves the inn, there are not many cultivators on the street. When he gets closer to E.G., the number of cultivators he sees increases. In particular, there are several qi condensation cultivators around Xiaohua. They are all walking in the direction of E.G. Xiaohua understands in his heart that not all of them are going to E.G. Sure enough, they are the same as Xiaohua. They walk in front of E.G. and stop. In front of Xiaohua is a very huge square. At a glance, it has a radius of thousands of feet. Although it is not noon yet, there are already many people gathered in the square. Xiaohua can't see the depths of the square, but in front of Xiaohua, there are many cultivators sitting cross-legged. In front of these cultivators, there are some things placed in front of them, just like the stalls in the secular world. -5. Chapter 13:18. This E.G.'s plaza was next to the lake. When Xiaohua arrived, there were many shuttles coming over from the water. On the shuttles, there were cultivators wearing the same clothes. They must be from the same sect. Xiaohua carefully looked at everything in the plaza. After all, this was his first time coming to EG, so he was quite excited. Of course, at the same time, he was also nervous. Because there were many things he didn't know, he was afraid of exposing himself. He looked at the cultivators who came from the same direction as him. Some swaggered, ignoring everything else, and directly entered EG. Some were like Xiaohua, standing slightly and looking around for a moment. They took out a cloak from their storage pouch and skillfully put it on, covering their faces. This is a good idea, why didn't I think of it? Xiaohua was slightly surprised. He knew that these people often came to EG. Then, he thought, forget it, it's my first time coming here. I'll take a look first. If there's any talisman ink or something like that, I'll buy some with spirit stones. I won't think about the rest for now. After making up his mind, Xiaohua calmed down and walked towards the square. Before he could reach the edge of the square, he heard a voice shouting from the side of the square's entrance. Me, cheap me, only 10 high-grade spirit stones, 10 high-grade spirit stones? Why is it so cheap? When Xiaohua heard this, his eyes lit up. He quickened his pace and ran towards the source of the voice. Unfortunately, he was far from the only one who heard this. By the time he arrived, that stall was already surrounded by many cultivators. Xiaohua was somewhat anxious, but all the cultivators in front of him had cultivation levels higher than his, so he didn't dare to carelessly squeeze in. You, how could you possibly be a mystic insect? A shrill voice rang out. It was a female cultivator about 25 or 26 years old who had squeezed to the front of the stall. She was currently draping an extremely beautiful camouflage over her shoulders. She asked in astonishment, "You're completely useless in the camouflage." Behind the stall was a young cultivator around the age of 17 or 18, about the same age as Xiaohua. His appearance was extremely fair, and his eyes were rolling around randomly. He appeared to be exceptionally quick-witted. The young cultivator was all smiles as he said, "Fellow Taoist, this camouflage cloth isn't suitable for you. Think about it, if you wear this camouflage cloth of mine, wouldn't your appearance that outshines the moon and puts flowers to shame be covered by it?" When the female cultivator heard this, she couldn't help but blush. "Don't be so glib-tongued. Your mystique seems to only be able to cover your face. It can't even conceal your cultivation base. How can it be called a mystique? Not to mention 10 high-grade spirit stones, in I's opinion, even a single high-grade spirit stone is not worth it." An old cultivator next to the female cultivator frowned and scolded. "Fellow Taoist, it's obvious that you're an itinerant cultivator who's experienced a lot. You're truly worthy of I's admiration. To tell the truth, what fellow Taoist is talking about is a mystique. However, this mystique isn't the same. The 7 possibilities sex mystique can conceal everything from a cultivator and has many uses. However, not all mystiques in the world have the same function as the 7 possibilities sex mystique." The young cultivator didn't show the slightest bit of fear and said with a matter-of-fact tone, "Some mystiques can't conceal a cultivator's cultivation base and can only change it. Naturally, changing it to a higher level is impossible. In fact, fellow Taoists, think about it again. Even if Qi condensation cultivators were a genuine mystique, a golden core or nascent soul cultivator would still be able to see through our true appearance. Rather than that, if you were a genuine mystique and spend several tens or hundreds of top-grade spirit stones, wouldn't you only be able to deceive a foundation establishment cultivator? Fellow Taoists, think about it again. Are you willing to pay such a large price for a genuine 7 possibilities sex mystique? Nonsense. If I had that many spirit stones, I would have already gone to the city's north. Why would I still be wandering around here?" A burly cultivator sneered. "Fellow Taoist, looking at your cultivation base, going to the city's north is only a matter of time. There's no need to rush. Listen to I first." The young cultivator cupped his fists and said with a smile, "If fellow Taoist doesn't have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of upper-grade spirit stones, and only spends a few hundred upper-grade spirit stones to buy an ordinary bewildering pill, which can only lower fellow Taoist's cultivation base, then what can it be? Apart from qi condensation, isn't it still qi condensation? What's the difference between wearing a mystique or not? Xiaohua immediately understood the young cultivator's words. Indeed, the 7 possibilities sex mystique didn't have any meaning to Xiaohua. Perhaps a foundation establishment cultivator would be able to see through his true appearance. What was the difference between it and a normal cloak? Ha ha ha, no wonder your mystique is so cheap. It's basically the same as a cloak. The burly cultivator laughed and sneered. If what you said is true, then I only need to buy a cloak with a low-grade spirit stone and it'll cover my face. What's the use of your mystique to cover my face? With that, the cultivator threw the bewildering insect in front of the young cultivator and left. Everyone laughed when they heard this and immediately dispersed. Only the female cultivator at the front still held the bewildering insect in her hand and hesitated. Fellow Taoist, you really have a discerning eye. Where are you going to find this kind of thing? If you don't want to regret it, then you should make a move now, the young cultivator hurriedly said. But, the female cultivator pursed her lips and said, I also have a cloak. I only see that your mystique looks pretty. Whether or not it can cover my face, I don't care. Ah? At this time, Xiaohua had already arrived in front of them. Hearing this, he couldn't help but bitterly smile in his heart. He thought of the peacock fantasy that Xiao Xinrui bought at the market. Wasn't it because it was pretty? Alas, this female cultivator really isn't a male cultivator. Xiaohua sighed and secretly said in his heart. But soon after, he laughed even more hoarsely. These words aren't generally correct. Fellow Taoist, if you really like it, forget it. Today is the first time EG has opened, so I'll spare you 3 spirit stones. It's only 7 high-grade spirit stones. What do you think? The young cultivator's face was resolute, as if he was cutting off meat from his body. This? The female cultivator bit her lip. Her face was still filled with disappointment. She was just about to put the mystique in her hand on the ground. Forget it. Since fellow Taoist likes it so much, Alas, if it weren't for the strict order of my sect, what harm would there be in giving this mystique to fellow Taoist? As the ancient saying goes, treasured swords are given to heroes, red makeup goes with beauties. This mystique is exactly what fellow Taoists should wear. I'll give you 5 high-grade spirit stones. How about it? The young cultivator's face was slightly pale. It seemed that he really had reached his bottom line. Hee, that's what you said. The female cultivator chuckled. She quickly slapped her storage pouch and took out 5 high-grade spirit stones. She handed them over to the young cultivator, turned around, and left. Alas, the young cultivator sighed helplessly and shook his head. His eyes were filled with helplessness. In just a moment, the young cultivator raised his head. When he saw Xiaohua walk to the front of the stall, his expression immediately changed. He was full of smiles as he picked up the mystique in front of him and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, I can tell at a glance that you're a person of great stature. A rogue cultivator like you is the easiest to target. If it weren't for that mystique covering your face, you wouldn't even be bothered by a female cultivator who wants to dual cultivate with you. When Xiaohua heard this, he smiled bitterly. He also wanted to take a look, so he unconsciously reached out to take it. Fellow Taoist's eyes are indeed sharp. You really know what's good for you. Just based on fellow Taoist's flattery, there's no need to say anything else. That fellow Taoist just now offered 7 spirit stones, so I will give fellow Taoist some benefits. Only 6 high-grade spirit stones. What do you think? Xiaohua held the so-called mystique in his hand and carefully examined it. This mystique was made from an unknown material and was very light. However, apart from some talisman characters on the hood, there was no difference from an ordinary Taoist robe. After thinking for a while, Xiaohua smiled and said, I wonder which sect fellow Taoist is from. Fellow Taoist is noisy. If you want to buy it, then name a price. If it's suitable, I will give it to you. Why try to curry favor with I? In any case, I am not a rogue cultivator and have no relationship with you. The young cultivator frowned and replied with extreme displeasure. His face was full of vigilance. Sigh, since fellow Taoist knows that I am a rogue cultivator, how can I afford 6 high-grade spirit stones? Xiaohua said with a smile. The young cultivator glanced at Xiaohua and said, Actually, fellow Taoist, I'll say something unpleasant. With fellow Taoist cultivation, I think you don't need to buy this mystique. Even if you cover your face, with such a low cultivation, you'll only make it more conspicuous. You might as well save up some spirit stones and buy a defensive Taoist robe. This is the right way. This? Xiaohua's face was slightly red. He pointed at the mystique at the side and said, Actually, I will also tell you the truth. The style of this mystique is much better than a Taoist robe. I like it very much. You. The young cultivator's face was full of resentment. He picked up the mystique and threw it to Xiaohua. He sneered and said, Since fellow Taoist is so vain, I will fulfill your wish. If someone else buys this mystique, it will cost at least 6 spirit stones. If fellow Taoist wants it, then take 5. Sigh, forget it, just take 3 high-grade spirit stones. Then, he muttered in a low voice, I'm afraid, you can't even take out 3. Sure enough, Xiaohua muttered. Fellow Taoist, don't tell me you really don't have 3 high-grade spirit stones. The young cultivator stared blankly and said angrily, Fellow Taoist, 3 spirit stones is I's lowest price. I have worked hard for more than a month. You can't let I work hard for nothing. When Xiaohua heard this, he raised his eyebrows and somewhat understood. Oh, these 3 spirit stones are the lowest price given by my sect. I see that fellow Taoist really wants it, and looking at your cultivation, you really can't take out the spirit stones of my sect. That's why I said it. I really can't reduce it anymore. The young cultivator hurriedly said, High-grade spirit stones. I don't have them. I wonder what fellow Taoist is willing to exchange. Xiaohua said with a smile. Sigh, if you don't have spirit stones, what good things can you have? The young cultivator waved his hand and said with a sigh, Forget it, looking at your cultivation. Sigh, I was also in dire straits like you in the past. I won't say anything to you. Take out all the spirit stones you have, and I will give this mystique to you. After the young cultivator finished speaking, he stared at Xiaohua. It was quite thought-provoking. How could Xiaohua take advantage of this? Although he didn't know why the young cultivator was staring at him, he only shook his head and said, You just need to say what you want. If I have it, I will naturally take it out. If not, I will turn around and leave. The young cultivator nodded slightly and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist indeed, has some character. It's not out of I's expectations. Firm and straightforward people are easily broken. This shouldn't be the character of a loose cultivator. Soon after, he looked around and saw that there weren't any cultivators. He said with a smile, You can take this mystique. Although this mystique is worth 3 high-grade spirit stones, it's still something I personally made. Giving it to you is nothing. You really want to give it to me? Xiaohua was stunned. The young cultivator's attitude was completely different from before. He didn't understand the young cultivator's meaning. Take it. In the past, when I was your age, my cultivation wasn't high, and I suffered humiliation. Now that I see you, I think of myself in the past. This mystique is only worth 3 spirit stones in I's eyes. If it can be of greater use to you, even if I don't want these 3 spirit stones, I'll still be gratified in my heart. The young cultivator said sincerely. These words were somewhat familiar to Xiaohua's ears. Wasn't this what he said to Fan Riguan's family? A top-grade parasol pill only had healing and commemorative significance to him, but to Zhu Xier and the others, it was a perfect life and a fresh life. Similarly, this mystique was worth 3 high-grade spirit stones to the young cultivator, but to him, a loose cultivator who was only at the 2nd layer of the qi refining realm, it might be a life. Although there is mutual deception in the cultivation world, although there is the law of the jungle, there are still people who sympathize with the weak and help the weak. Xiaohua sighed with emotion. Thus, Xiaohua said with a smile, "Many thanks, fellow Taoist. In fact, I don't have any spirit stones, but I do have some fireball talismans. I don't know if fellow Taoist needs them?" Fireball talismans? The young cultivator didn't frown and immediately nodded. "And that's fine. If fellow Taoist has the heart to give them, then give them to me at the price." "Okay." Xiaohua nodded and looked left and right. He clapped his hands and took out 4 fireball talismans, handing them over to the young cultivator. When the young cultivator saw the 4 fireball talismans, he said with a smile, "I appreciate fellow Taoist's kindness, but these fireball talismans... High grade." When he took them in his hands and was about to decline, he suddenly recognized them and looked at Xiaohua in shock. He then looked around and put the fireball talismans into his storage pouch first, saying in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist, don't you need them to protect you? Even if you want to change them, it's better to change into some defensive Taoist robes." Xiaohua smiled but didn't say anything. "And since it's like this, I'll accept them." The young cultivator didn't say much and said again, "I meet the requirements. How should I address fellow Taoist?" "I Xiaohua greets fellow Taoist Fu." Xiaohua cupped his hands and saluted. "Hee, fellow Taoist Xiao is too polite," Guing said with a smile. He still wanted to say something, but another person came over. Guing immediately called out loudly, "Fellow Taoist, quickly come over and take a look. Cheap and good bewitching Yong. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Calm to vote for it. -5. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.